Our next work session.
Next work session, so that will be in July work session. Okay, without objection? Without objection? Okay, seeing none, so ordered. Mr. Bird, Madam Reporter, next item, please.
Resolution adopting personnel pay plan for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2015 and ending June 30, 2016.
Okay, Mr. Manager, represent.
Thank you. This is the general pay plan that sort of establishes a structure on how we pay our employees. This doesn't determine their salary, but it does put people in categories. There were some typos in the original packet that went out. We have corrected those. They'll be forwarded to next week's meeting.
Okay. All right. Very well. Let me pause here for a second and tell anybody, if y'all want to speak on any issue on the agenda, then we have cards. The deputy has cards here. Just raise your hand and he'll bring you a card. You can fill it out, and then when it's finished, then just raise it there. He'll come and get it and deliver it up to the stage, and we'll hear from you. Okay, Madam Reporter, next item, please. I think, sorry, did I miss something, Jim? Are you going to present on that?
No, that's all we need basically. This is, again, the basic structure. When we get to the budget talks about personnel,
Okay.
budget, that's when we get the nuts and bolts of who's getting what. But this, again, is the basic structure and where it will fit in. So.
Okay, so that can, without objection, that's one. Yes, sir.
You're not making any changes from last time we discussed it, right?
Now with the pay plan, other than the typos, just done. Now with the within the budget, there are a couple changes. I'll go over when we get to that item as far as personnel goes since the work session.
So any substantive changes you're going to go over? Right. Okay, very well. Then that, I guess, I assume can go on the consent agenda without objection. Seeing none, so ordered.
Resolution approving Lakeland School System 5-year capital improvement plan sponsored by Federal.
Okay, let's go to the superintendent. All right, superintendent.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you. This was, and to the audience that's gathered here, this was the revised capital improvement plan that was approved by the Lakeland School System Board of Education actually last night. And I know everybody's familiar with the circumstance relating to this, and you guys forgive me, there are a lot of repeat customers in here that have heard this already, so forgive me for kind of hearing some of this again. But it is important that everybody understand at least where the school board is coming from and kind of what our motivation is, and ultimately what we feel like is a capital request that we think is in the best interest of the children of Lakeland and of Lakeland school system. There's a saying that says the end of every journey is to return to where you started and see it again for the first time. And that's kind of what we were forced to do after the referendum. And just to review, and I'd like to make this clear, we were faced with what we saw as an issue that needed to be addressed by the school board, and that was the issue of overcrowding at Arlington Middle School. And as I've said many times, we feel very fortunate and we feel very lucky to have educational partners in Arlington Community Schools and to have a place for our middle and high school students to go to school. However, we were faced with the situation of increasing crowdedness, frankly, overcapacity at Arlington Middle School. And so a little over a year ago, about 14 months ago, we started to put together a plan, and we started with that issue, the issue of the middle school. And as we did research, and as we looked at numbers, and as we looked at financing, and we looked at enrollment trends, the decision that the school board made was that the best interest of students would be to go ahead and build a 6 through 12 school in what became the Lakeland Prep Project. And I do want to note, I appreciate the Board of Commission's support for that plan. We had unanimous support for that, and I do want to say we felt and still feel like that plan was in the best interest of the students of Lakeland and of Lakeland school system. However, it's also appropriate to acknowledge that in light of the referendum that rejected the financing mechanism for that plan, that we were asked, or really put in the circumstance, to go back and create a new plan because the problem or the issue itself didn't go away. The rejection of the bond issuance did not solve the problem of the overcrowding at Lakeland Middle School. So again, we're circling back and kind of looking at that for the first time. I also want to acknowledge that the results of the bond referendum were taken to heart by the Lakeland Board of Education and certainly by me. It's not something that was ignored. And when we looked back at doing a plan, we tried to learn from the lessons of both the campaign and the results itself. And what that meant was we were looking at a smaller scale. And what you're going to see is something that instead of trying to solve the problem for the next 100 years, is at least trying to solve the problem for the short term. I also want to address the only reason that we were able to put together a revised plan so quickly is because we had spent the better part of 14 months gathering data, gathering information. We had already moved forward with the land acquisition and researching available pieces of land in Lakeland that would be appropriate for a campus, and settling on and finding the land that we still feel like is the best piece of land for the future Lakeland High School and certainly for the Lakeland Middle School right now. So those are just a couple of the things that in terms of context that we want to make sure the Board of Commissioners is aware of. To give a couple of statements that provide some context for this and kind of help define the concern, I want to share these with you. And I do want to note that these statements were, I'd say, approved by Tammy Mason. I meet with the Arlington Community School Superintendent, Ms. Mason, very frequently. She was aware of these statements. I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page on this, and we are. This one is directly from the Arlington Community Schools Capital Plan, in which they looked at every one of their facilities and tried to, again, make decisions about how to address the concerns that they have. The situation right now at Arlington Middle School is they are operating at 96.3 utilization with the portables that they have, and 109.4% without the portables. And the current enrollment is 1,211 students. Now, Arlington Community Schools identified optimal capacity as 90%. In other words, 90% of capacity is what they feel like is in the best interest of students. That's 90% of capacity. If you took away the portables, they'd be at 109.4. With the portables, they're at 96.3. So on that statement, there's no disagreement. That's just the situation right now at Arlington Middle School, which is, and this was noted frequently last night, and I want to note it again, Arlington Middle School, which is an outstanding school, where our students are getting an outstanding education. There's not any debate about that. It's a great school. We have concerns, though, about what operating over capacity means for the future education of those students and the students that are coming. We feel like both Arlington and this is me and the Lakeland School Board, we feel like growth will occur both at Arlington and in Lakeland, and we need to prepare for that growth, and we need to anticipate it, and we need to take action to make sure that we don't put the students, frankly, and the faculty in an even tougher situation than it is to operate a school over capacity. This statement was also agreed upon. We worked with our shared planner, Deborah Jones, who is shared by all of the municipal school systems, to make projections. And this is based on what's called the birth survival cohort. And it's based on the number of students that we know are in the Lakeland and Arlington areas and the population over the next few years. And the projections by the shared planning specialists that we share and that we sign off on are that the enrollment of Arlington Middle School will hover around 1,200 for the foreseeable future. There's no reason to think that that's going to solve itself, is another way to say that. For some context, because I think it's easy to talk about school enrollments, and when we talk about a school like a high school which can have 1,800 or 2,000 students, and we talk about a middle school, those of us that work in education are kind of familiar with those sizes, and a lot of people aren't. So what I did is I put together some data on the enrollment of the former Shelby County schools, kind of pre-merger, the former Shelby County schools middle schools, because I thought that would be an appropriate reference point. Most people are familiar with those schools, and we're familiar with the governance of Shelby County schools before and the kinds of decisions that they made regarding capacity and things like that. So starting with the smallest school right now, which is Millington Middle, they have 497 students. Germantown Middle is at 665. Ackland Middle in Bartlett, 666. Von Lynn Middle, also in Bartlett, 725. Elmore Park Middle, 775. Houston Middle, 862. Collierville Middle, 871. Schilling Farms Middle, 1,049. Arlington Middle, 1,211 students. just to give you some context on what kind of middle school sizes have been found to be appropriate in historical Shelby County schools, frankly. I do want to note that in the case of Collierville Middle and Schilling Farms Middle are Collierville's two middle schools. They are both deemed to be overcrowded, and Collierville Middle is pushing to build a third middle school so they can accommodate that number of students. So they are attempting to address that situation of overcrowding right away in the short term. And that brings us to the capital plan that the school board came up with. This is based on a few assumptions that I want everybody to be aware of, again, for context. One of those is that the proposed middle school that we're proposing would be built on the Jones property that we have done the due diligence work on and intend to move forward with a purchase-sale agreement, or at least conversations about a purchase-sale agreement on that property. The reason I note that is because it has a specific asking price, which is the price that was negotiated previously for $1 million, but it also includes some very specific numbers that are an investment in this site. And I want to be clear on this because if we were to just grab 15 acres somewhere and just build a middle school, these costs would not be as much. I just want to acknowledge that. This is for 94 acres. This is for a piece of land that could be established to a full high school campus eventually. And I say eventually because I've clarified this as well. When the school board and I came back after the referendum to look at, again, how do we address the issue of overcrowding at Arlington Middle, I want to be very clear about this. We did not talk about how do we sneak in a high school? How do we backdoor a high school? How do we make it look like we're building a middle school and then build a high school? I will say that in the minds, in my mind, and I believe right now, in the minds of the school board, we are thinking about a high school that would be built in 12, 15, 20 years. The results of the referendum to us have led us to the conclusion, based on the response in the referendum and also the feedback that we got during the lead up to the referendum, that we need to think about a long-term partnership with Arlington Community Schools for the high school. And this is a way we feel like we can address the middle school situation now, but have an excellent piece of land for an eventual, whenever that may be, high school campus. Part of our initial due diligence for the Lakeland Prep project was to spend a significant amount of time researching available pieces of land that were 70 acres or so that would accommodate a full high school campus. What we found there are a few, but not a lot. And there's certainly land out there, but there's not an abundance of land that is currently sewerable or has three-phase power or access to water that we would need for a comprehensive campus like that. So that one of the reasons that we feel like an investment in this large piece of land is appropriate now and in the future. So we've got property costs of $1 million. The utility estimates that we got from MLGW were about $1.1 million, and that is to bring the utilities up through the site. If you're familiar with the site, it's in the middle of a large tract of land, so there is some distance to bring those utilities up. Private drive road construction of almost $1 million that would give us access from Canada Road and Old Brownsville Road to the campus. School construction of about 110,000 square feet at $125 per square foot. We feel like we had very good data on this. And I do want to recognize Jim Mitchell from Southern Educational Strategies, who has been consulting with us and has just been a valuable partner with his experience as an operations director and superintendent in Shelby County Schools, and is just someone who's given a life to education. He's really done a lot of this work and assisted with a lot of it, so thank you. This school construction is based on an actual program that we put together, and the program means that we said what kind of classrooms, what kind of spaces would we need in this building, and so this is not just based on a rough guess. This is what might this school actually require. The $125 a square foot is based on recently opened bids of comparable school projects. We feel very comfortable with that number as well. That brings the construction cost just alone to almost $14 million. Construction cost contingency at another $660,000. Those are the things you don't expect but often find in a construction project. The architects and engineers fees that have already been negotiated, $652,000. And then the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, those are the things that go in the schools that, allow you to teach, desks and, smart boards and everything else you need in the school at about $1.8 million. And that was based on the furniture, fixtures, and equipment of Collierville Middle, which is the most recently opened middle school, 3 years ago. And that was also constructed by Renaissance Architecture Group, who we worked with. That brings us to a total of maybe so close to 20, it's funny, but that's the actual total. It was $19,991,789 is what we are asking the Board of Commissioners to support for this revised capital. I want to give you some of the details of the campus itself. And this was put together by our partners A2H and Renaissance, our design team that have worked with us through this. Because we have completed the due diligence of the Jones property, we know quite a bit about the land. And the question that I posed to the design team was to be sure, if we just build a standalone middle school now, is there enough space, is it appropriate on this campus to add on to it later so that it could be a full campus, kind of Lakeland prep style school that we envisioned before. So what the architects and engineers came back with was yes, that is possible on this land, depending on how you configure the building. And they even went as far as to put together a conceptual site plan as to what that would look like. So what we're proposing is only the part you see here in purple, the driveway here, that would be the bus turnaround. These are the roads we'd have to bring in, and some parking here. Everything else over here is future. And again, by future, that may be 12, maybe 15, maybe 20, depending on what the arrangement that we work out with is in Arlington. But we don't anticipate that being short-term as part of this plan. This gives you an idea of what the building actually might look like. Again, the parts that are in color and kind of gray shaded here are the parts that would be built in this phase. This would be a 2-story here. This would be an anticipated, I'd said 3-story, but after some conversation, probably just be a 2-story. It could be a 3-story once the high school is built in. So these sections would not be built as part of this first phase. It would only be this, and then a second floor of here. I also think it's worth noting that after the referendum, again, because of the feedback that we got during the referendum and certainly the result, when I came back to Dr. Mitchell and came back to the design team, my question was, what would it cost to build a building that's comparable to the very cost-effective buildings that have been built traditionally in Shelby County schools? So that's what this is modeled over. And I want everybody to be aware, this is not a Cadillac design. We think it's a solid design, and we think, as we have found at Lakeland Elementary, if you bring in the right teachers and the right kids and the right administration, you're going to have an awesome school, and that's the approach here. But we did have an emphasis on making sure this was as cost-effective and affordable as possible. Again, it's one of what we felt like was one of the lessons from the referendum campaign. However, we still think it's something we can be very proud of. And as part of that conversation, I asked the design team, so what might a school built on this budget look like? So this is not necessarily what it would look like, but it's the type of school you can get for that kind of budget. It's the type of school that they're familiar with. I think it's a nice looking school that would be comfortable and solidly built. It's called a Georgian Revival style is what this is particularly. Again, this has not been signed off on, but it was a design that we liked and a design approach that we thought looked good. And what this shows you is how the future building would connect to the current building. And one aspect of this that we kind of like, at least in this conceptual phase, is this idea of maybe having a courtyard here that would allow for outdoor eating or art space or outdoor classroom or some things like that. So, we had a little fun with it in terms of the conception, but that's basically what this kind of budget would get us. That's what the entrance to a school like this might look like. And I did want everybody to be able to see how would this sit on the entirety of the Jones property. And again, this would not be built at this point. We have discussed if we do, for some reason, come in under budget, funds are available, maybe adding some extra fields for middle school sports, but that's not necessarily a part of this. That's something we have to work out as we went. And so what I did here, and something I did not note before, this middle school proposal is for a 5 through 8 school. So most of the other schools here are 6 through 8, but we would be proposing a 5 through 8 school. And what that would do is address one of our other concerns, and certainly a concern that came up during the referendum campaign, and that is how are we going to address growth at Lakeland Elementary School. So the thought would be that assuming in our minds that at the same time we do this, we brought back the students that are currently zoned to Donaldson Elementary, that we would move the entire 5th grade up to the new school, and that would free up a significant amount of room at Lakeland Elementary and allow for quite a bit of growth there. It would certainly be well below the 90% optimal capacity at that school as well. So as you can see, that would put us not even on the low end, but on the higher half of those schools. And this is based on the shared planner's projection of what the 5 through 8 enrollment would be in August of 2018, based on the growth projections that we have at this point, or the enrollment projections that we have at this point. And that just brings us back to the capital improvement plan itself. That's what we are submitting to you, Board of Commissioners, and humbly requesting that you consider funding. We feel like this is a great plan. In fact, we're very excited about this plan. Again, we thought our original plan was the best plan, but sometimes you can't have what's in your mind as the best plan. And that being said, we think this is easily the next best plan. We think that this will allow for the best educational opportunities for our students. We feel like it will alleviate the crowding situation that we have in Arlington Middle, and put us in a great position as a school system and a community to continue the quality of education that our students are getting at Lakeland Elementary. So I appreciate your time, and I'm certainly open to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. I'll go to commissioners first. Let me say something to the audience so I can kind of determine where we are on these cards. I have pretty much everybody either says they want to speak to the tax or the school and the tax. But then I have a couple here that say they would just like to speak to the school. There are two different resolutions, or an ordinance and a resolution on the agenda. The resolution that's before us is for the school capital plan. If you want to speak to that, you can speak to that. But if you're wanting to speak to the tax, which is tied to the school, I would recommend you speak to the budget ordinance, which is coming up item 12. Is there anyone that would like to speak just to the school and not address the tax and the school? Because we'll allow you to talk about the school when we talk about the tax. Anybody want to speak just to this item? Okay. You want to speak just to the school?
Yeah, I marked it as tax, but I wasn't sure how to mark it, so I'd like to speak.
Okay, you want to speak to the school capital? All right, let me go to commissioners first, and then I'll come to the public. Yes, sir. Commissioner Nixon.
Okay, since we're going with the middle school now, it only needs 15 acres. Did the school board and yourself ever look into the aspect of possibly building this school on the 100 acres that we actually own?
We did spend some time talking about that, and, particularly with Dr. Mitchell and the design team, to look at the feasibility of it. The main drawback to that in our minds was considering frankly, the lack of options of available land. We were concerned that if we built a high school somewhere other than this piece of property, that 12, 15, 20 years down the road, we may look up and find there is no suitable land for a high school. And we thought that the investment in this land would be well worth it. Also, we felt like that, at this point, the city and the school system have already invested quite a bit into the due diligence process for this land, and we have somebody who's willing to sell it to us at what we think is a good price. But we have discussed that, and to be fair, we have discussed that as a fallback option in the event that this land purchase cannot be acquired.
So, to make sure I understand you, Ed, are you saying that it is possible to build a middle school on the 100 acres that we already own?
Well, what we don't know about that land, before we have formally agreed to move forward with discussions on purchasing this land, the first phase, which took, I guess, 4 or 5 months, was to do the due diligence on this land that definitively proved, yes, you can put a building there, the soil is good, the waters of the state, issues can be handled, there's no environmental threats there. We have not done that on the 100 acres. So there's apparently enough land there where the school could be built that's not in the floodplain. I know enough that, it picked up on that. But we have not done any formal study as we have with that land.
So y'all haven't made the effort to even look into the possibility to build it in there. Y'all feel like it's the best course of action to go with this 100 acres to buy, right?
Yes. And I wouldn't say we haven't made any effort, but we haven't done a formal study as we have with this land.
And it's your assumption that you think with the little knowledge that you know, that it is maybe possible to build a middle school on that 100 acres?
Yes, possible, yes.
Thank you.
Now, my understanding is there's not 100 acres of buildable campus
Well, I
land.
understand
But
that.
we
We
can go
only
build-
need 15 acres
Yes.
for a middle
Yes.
school. I understand that if you went with the 100 acres that we already own, that there's no way we can put a high school and a middle school on there. But with a middle school, we only need 15 acres.
That's right. If all we need is 15 acres, we believe that the 100 acres that the city owns could be an option. Yes.
Thank you.
If you did that, say you take 15, so you can do the rest, the 85 that's left. I mean, that's in a dam, I guess that would be my concern. We have 85 acres that we really can't do anything with. I guess my other question would be, can we sell the land that we own and get anything out of it?
Can I take that?
Yes. Yeah, please. That's what I was asking you. Ted would, I would expect Ted to know that.
Sure.
You'd be correct.
Now, I think we all know the 100-acre site is a difficult site. There's several factors there. There's a water body on it. There's a gas line going through a portion of it. The topography is very difficult through the majority of the property. There's one flat area, and that's what we talked about building an athletic field. We have a grant currently to develop between 14 and 16 acres of athletic field on a flat piece, all within the breach area. Now that's where we get into trouble. Now it's not necessarily a floodplain, but it's a breach area. If Garter Lake Dam were to fail, this is where the water would go. And there's been studies done on how high that water would go. In other words, you're not putting anything within that breach area. Now there is land outside of the breach area on 100 acres to put probably a 15-acre facility, but again, it is challenging. So it's not a slam dunk for sure. And I would anticipate additional construction costs because of the topography alone, trying to get to an area where you have that much land, beyond the breach line and in front of the gas line.
I know when we were talking about the sports park, they had to do at least $250,000 just to get it to where we could start doing anything, just for structural stuff. Have we ever tried to sell that land to see that we could get anything out of it?
Not formally. It's been discussed even doing land swaps possibly to find more suitable land for larger scale developments like the athletic parks. That's been talked about. I don't think there's ever been a study purposing that land to anything. I know when we bought it before my time, but I don't think there's ever an intended use. Now, it's been talked about over the years for simply an extension of I-8 Park for mountain bike trails for the bulk of it. There's some drawings done that we found in the back closet for some municipal facilities, but the majority of them would remain wooded and undeveloped for the most part.
Okay, that's all I have right now.
Okay. Let me ask the superintendent something. Here's how, correct me if I'm wrong, here's how I'm kind of looking at this thing. If we look at a school, we really need to look more out of the 12, 15, 20-year range where we want to be, where we need to be as a city, the most cost-effective solution long-term. And so that's what I envision this being. If we build a middle school, wherever that might be on the 100 acres or wherever, then we, in 12, 15, 20 years, we have a need to bring our high school students back now. So we have to build out a complete high school where this building a portion, essentially what would amount to a portion of the high school, and then bringing in those students and then growing into that high school and later building a middle school is actually, in my mind, it would be the more cost-effective solution. And that's why I would support this. I know it's a little bit more money. I think we also, in that long-term plan, we do get the benefit of securing property at a very good price that may not be available in the future. And we can always, when we do fill out that high school, when we outgrow that high school, middle school population, then we can fall back and probably more easily find a 15-acre tract to put that, whether it be on the 100 acres at that time or another place, we could build the traditional middle school that everybody typically sees. And so the path to where we ultimately are going to be 20, 30 years down the road, this is the more economical path. This is the least expensive path for Lakeland citizens. Kind of hard to see and hard to believe when you're looking at a figure like that, but it is if you look long term.
That sums up very well our thinking in that, we are essentially building part of a high school, an eventual high school. It will serve very, very well as a middle school now. When we expand it, we think it could be a combined middle and high school. If we outgrow that, and we need that whole campus just for high school students, as you said, then we're going back later and building a smaller school instead of,
Let me go to Commissioner Toy again.
I've spent the last year on the Parks Board looking at this 100 acres. I've walked it, I've spent a lot of time on it. 15 acres of flat ground on this property is a stretch. It's more like 12, maybe 14 at the most. In order to utilize the property just for what we propose for the park, we're looking at somewhere between $750,000 and $1 million worth of dirt work, just prep. While I understand Commissioner Nicholson's comments about wanting to consider this property, the due diligence and consideration of this property for just ball fields was overwhelming to me. I thought we could use the grant money that we were getting, and $250,000, maybe $400,000 worth of dirt work would put us in a position to start building infrastructure, and it just won't do it. A2H just came back and has underscored the overall cost, the ceiling of this, upwards to $1 million. If we're going to spend $1 million just to prep the ground, we're better off to buy the 100 acres that we can build the whole project one time into it. Nobody in their right mind builds a house and then comes back in 2 years and builds a garage. If you're going to build a house and have a garage, you build it all at one time. I can't help but believe that if people that are commenting about building a school applied to their own home budgets, the premise that they want to apply to us, Garner Lake could be lined with double wides. This is just not the smart way to spend money. I really believe if we can secure the 100 acres from Mr. Jones and set ourselves up to succeed and not to fail, we're better off to go this way. And I support this project 100%.
Commissioner, did I have both commissioners agree? Commissioner. Yeah.
The agreement with Arlington, have we talked to them about the middle school? If we do a middle school and we can continue to have the high school kids there?
We have talked informally between superintendents. So, I mean, Ms. Mason was aware that we were going to move forward with revising the capital plan. I was in close contact, kind of leading up to her. Again, like I said, we collaborated on those statements to make sure I wouldn't presume to speak for them, and wanted to make sure that she was comfortable with anything that I was saying regarding that school. And those were two statements that we were very comfortable with.
So if we say, okay, we're giving you your termination clause for the middle school, that's okay. We can still go on and have a relationship for high school.
Yes, well, there's going to have to be a renegotiation of the interlocal, really, in any respect. And as soon as this gets approved and starts to move forward, those conversations, in my mind, and my hope would be that they'd happen immediately. There's interest on both sides for, even if this happens, for an ongoing relationship with the high school.
I mean, one thing is, we hopefully will start growing, but Arlington is growing. They're almost done with an apartment complex out there. I didn't know this until the other day. There's a Walmart Supercenter that's slated down there. They've got a hospital on the agenda. They've got a lot of development coming up, so I don't know this, but I would presume that some of our children, if we did take some of the middle children out and take our grade school kids back, that would free up areas for their new rooftops and new kids that go there. So,
Yes, that'd be a logical conclusion.
Okay.
Commissioner Nixon.
I've got twofold questions, one for you, one for the city attorney. We'll go to the city attorney first. Talking about this agreement, from a legal standpoint, if this project goes forward, and it looks like we are going to do something with the middle school, from a legal standpoint, does that break the agreement that they have? And then ultimately they say, well, we are in breach of it, not only from the middle, but from the high school aspect, and we do have to negotiate the whole deal over again? Or do you feel like that just doing this does not violate our relationship with the high school? Because it's obvious that the school board and the doctor wants to continue a relationship with the high school, which we should do, and we should continue that relationship. But is this jeopardizing that relationship by doing this? Then ultimately it is going to breach it one way or the other.
Well, I think I would respond in a couple different ways. One, the contract with Arlington School System, Arlington Community Schools, will be renegotiated. And I don't want to do that tonight here in a public setting with just us here. Now, I'm certain, I feel confident that Dr. Hall and Ms. Mason's communication and conversations have certainly contemplated that our kids are going to go to Arlington High School for the foreseeable future. That has been a part of the discussion throughout. And so that is very much their understanding, that is our understanding. The details of how the transition for the middle school have not been worked out yet in a formal way. We plan to do that depending on how tonight and next week goes here with your vote. But I don't really want to be in a position of saying that are we breaching a contract? I don't think we're breaching anything. We're working with a partner in a contract. And we're fortunate that they've been good and easy to work with so far. We anticipate that relationship continuing, and we all anticipate coming to an agreement that's satisfactory to both sides. What that will look like, I can't tell you right now. I don't think it will be viewed by Arlington as a breach of the contract. I think it will be viewed as a transition and a new contract that we'll enter into, most likely the longer term for the high school. But the details as to how the middle school transition works and what that means for the high school haven't been worked out in a formal yet. So I know there's probably sort of a lawyer answer for you, but I just don't think it's probably in anybody's best interest for us to be talking about that tonight. One, because we haven't had the opportunity to do that with the school board. Our school board, their school board hasn't had the opportunity to do it. The superintendents haven't done it in a formal fashion to say, here's what we're looking for, here's what we're looking for. So I guess the best way to answer that is we're working on it. We feel like we've got a good partner we have a good relationship with, and we envision coming to a new agreement that's satisfactory to everyone. That does involve our kids still going to the Arlington High School for the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you. Now, to you, Doctor. You made reference earlier in your presentation that the middle school, the Arlington Middle School, is a very good school.
Yes.
Correct. But I haven't really heard anything substance from the school board or you about what type of plan that y'all looked at to maybe still work with the middle school of expanding the Arlington Middle School to justify the overcrowding instead of building a new school. Would you elaborate on that?
I will, and I'll return to, again, because this is their document, I am comfortable speaking about it. I don't want to speak for them, but again, they have in their 5-year capital plan, and as it's been related to me, if there is not a new middle school built, we have a plan to expand Arlington Middle School to accommodate the students. At this point, and again, now this is my interpretation of what that would mean. Their school is built for 1,100, that's the capacity. They're at 1,200. Okay? In order to expand the school where they would be at their own self-defined optimal capacity of 90%, that would have to be a school that was built, bricks and mortar, for 1,333 students. If they were going to leave any room to grow, you wouldn't want to start at your optimal capacity, you want to start a little bit left. You start talking about a school, a middle school that's built for 1,400 or 1,500 students. At that point, in my opinion, of the school board, I'd also say in Dr. Mitchell's opinion, because he weighed in on that last night, if we're talking about a middle school, where one of the challenges of middle school is identity and getting personalized attention and finding yourself and the transition between elementary and high school, we feel like a middle school with 14 or 1,500 students would not be in the best interest of our students. And I only speak for our students. We don't feel like a school that size, that is conceivably an option, but we absolutely feel like that's not in the best educational interest of our students to go to a middle school. And I think that's why you see when you look at other middle schools in our community that are historically high-performing middle schools in the former Shelby County schools, you see sizes that are more in the 7, 8. When they start pushing 9 and 10, as Collierville is seeing, they start looking at building other schools because it's not been found to be optimal. Even if you're talking about optimal capacity, that 90% only goes so far. I mean, you could take the 90% and apply it to a student body of 2,000. You know, just because you can fit 2,000 middle schoolers in a school doesn't mean that's the right thing to do educationally. We feel like the right thing to do educationally is to have a school that's, again, kind of comfortably in that 6 to hopefully 900 students population. I hope I answered your question. We did consider the option of whether or not just doing nothing and allowing Arlington to expand the middle school, but we don't feel like that's in our students' best.
You answered it. Basically, you feel like that their expansion is not in the best interest of Lakeland students because they just want to make it a larger middle school, which you feel like it would not be in the best interest to be that large in the middle school. Is that correct?
That's correct. And historically, when schools got to be that big in Shelby County and other school systems, they don't tend to talk about expanding them. They tend to talk about, splitting the kids up and building new schools.
But Arlington never suggested to you that they would want to build another school. They only said expand that school to that capacity. Is that what you're saying?
Actually, I'm only referring to their capital improvement plan, which does have, one of their items was an expansion of Arlington Middle School.
So you're saying that you specifically didn't have any discussions with Arlington or their representatives about possibly just building another middle school?
About them building another
In a joint relationship that we have right now, a joint relationship of building another middle school.
I have not had that conversation. I guess in my mind, I feel like if we're going to invest in a middle school, it should probably be a Lakeland middle school. It should probably be an asset of Lakeland school system and not a shared asset that Arlington builds. Or in my mind, the best thing for the school system at that point would be for that school to be a Lakeland middle school.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that I think maybe lends some credibility to what our city attorney was saying, in his expectation that we may receive some level of cooperation with renegotiating an agreement in light of building a middle school, is that I watched the WKNO interview with you and Superintendent Mason, and what I found interesting, when you started talking about student enrollment numbers at Arlington, I think you were, in my mind, it was kind of a candy-coated message you had there, and she interrupted you to say that it was overcrowded. And so she made the point that, yes, it is overcrowded, which in my mind also insinuates that they want to do something about it. I've never met a superintendent that admits in public on camera that something's overcrowded and said, but we like it that way. Yeah. And so I anticipate that Superintendent Mason and them would in some form or fashion, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I would expect the same thing the city attorney was anticipating, is that some level of agreement would be in the works. And so Dr. Mitchell, I almost called you Superintendent Mitchell, but anyway, sorry. I work with Dr. Mitchell on the school board. I don't know, it seems like it was under you that we started building the model of school. It may have been just before you, but I think we started building the model of school that you see at Lakeland Elementary and so forth. And my mind's rusty because this was back in 2000, 2006 range, 2000, 2004 range maybe, when you were superintendent. But I thought maybe you had conducted a study. Can you come to the microphone? You had conducted a study to determine the optimal size of different schools, whether it be elementary, middle, high school, and it was based on a few things. That's operational efficiencies and student achievement would be two primary things. Am I recollecting that?
I've got a good memory.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor and members of the commission, it's good to see you again. And glad to be here, not only as a former superintendent, but also as a Lakeland resident. I'm happy to say that. I'll comment on a couple of things, Mr. Mayor. While I was assistant superintendent and then superintendent, as you know, we had an assistant superintendent of operations. You know, it was an area for school construction, planning, reconstruction, and renovations and additions. And I shared this last month. We were responsible during that time for building 22 new schools because of the extreme growth that was going on and more than 20 classroom additions. So we've had a lot of experience in this world. But we found that schools, particularly middle schools, were reaching close to 1,000 students. We began to look to where we could build another school that would serve that community. And quite frankly, that is exactly what happened here in this area. Children who were in middle school in Lakeland and Arlington back in around 1999 and 2000, they were going to school in Cordova and Mount Pisgah, and a few others going over in Bartlett. Both of those schools were approaching 1,000 in the middle school enrollment. If we had not decided at that point that the right thing to do, educationally, was to build another middle school, there may not be an Arlington Middle School today, because that's why it was built. We saw growth in the schools that these children were being assigned to attend, and we didn't think that was sustainable. We didn't think it was educationally sound. The research is pretty clear that somewhere between 700 and 900 children is a real optimal size for a middle school. These are adolescents who are trying to find their place and their identity. Now, I am very proud of what Arlington Middle has done. I was a superintendent when that school was, when we purchased the property, when we designed the school, when it was built. And as I said last night, I was the one who assigned the founding principal and the staff that went there. And I'm very proud of what they've accomplished. And they've done a great job. But in my best professional opinion, and this is based upon a lot of years of experience, you really make a mistake when you try to put 1,300, 1,400 children in one middle school. Yes, it can be done, but I don't think it's educationally sound. So if you want to look to the future and what's best for the children in this community, I think it's to go ahead and move forward with the planning for a middle school at this point. And you've got the unique opportunity to look at a potential piece of property that could be expanded, as your superintendent has said, it could be 15 years from now or more, to build a high school when it's necessary. And those sites are truly hard to find. I was involved with the site selection for the last two high schools that were built in Southland. That was selecting the site for Cordova High School and selecting the site for Arlington High School. I was involved in both of those. And they're not easy to find because there's just a lot of factors that have to go together in the right place at the right time. So, yes, the research is fairly clear, 700 to 900 children is a good size for a middle school. It's good operationally. It's good because if you say, well, why don't we build two schools with 450 children? Well, there's where you start spending money unnecessarily, and that's what you were talking about. Because it takes about $750,000 a year to operate any school, any elementary or middle school. That's the cost of the principal and the utilities and the custodial and the secretary and the librarian and the cafeteria. All of those things are fixed costs that go into any school. So it's better to build one that's between 700 and 900. But when you get much beyond that number for middle school children, I don't think it's education sound. So that was the reason for our recommendation. I think the school board saw that and understood. So does that help answer your question for you?
Absolutely, very thoroughly. I appreciate that. I'll tell you this, that I've served on 3 elected bodies now, and there's been no board that I've served on where we had better planning or anything that even approached the planning under the leadership that we had at Shelby County Schools under Dr. Mitchell and his successors there that I served under, had long-term plans for their operational side of their school system and the capital side of their school system. We always knew where we were going. We were enjoying top 100 school, top 100 ranked school in the United States. I think we were 85th out of over 10,000 schools.
Almost 14,000 schools.
Almost 14,000 schools at the time. And so we were seeing tremendous performance, but we knew where we were going, and we were always expecting better days because we knew we had a great plan in place. We had great people behind those plans. So appreciate you.
Well, you're very kind to say that, Mayor, and I really think that our community is at that same point now. With the right planning and the right decisions, we have the opportunity to position the community for tremendous growth, and schools definitely bring that. I'll finish with just this. When we did buy the land at Arlington Middle, it was bought from a developer. We wanted to also build homes around that site, similar to what we may have with the proposed site here in Lakeland. Within 5 years, every single lot around that school was sold, and homes were there. And that pattern has continued. And I'll just share this with you. 15 years ago, when we built the middle school in Arlington, Arlington had one elementary school. That's what we had 15 years ago, just like us in Lakeland, 15 years ago. You see what's happened since. And the schools are the magnet that can make that happen. Good schools, great people. Hope that helps you.
Well, great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Dr. Mitchell.
Dr. Mitchell.
Yes, sir.
You may want to stay up here on the front row.
They might come on up here.
May I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
One, was there ever a plan, to your knowledge, to build a middle school in Lakeland?
We looked at several sites, and since you brought this up, I will mention this. The 100 acres of land that the city now owns was an area that we considered when we were looking for land for Lakeland Elementary School. I walked that site also. I've been out there. It's beautiful, wonderfully heavily treed. We carefully considered that piece of land. As a matter of fact, I walked it with Mr. Jones one morning, about half a day we spent out there. And it's a beautiful piece of land. But we looked at it carefully and decided it was not the best place to build a school at that time. The topography, changes in elevation, made it difficult to find a good building site on there. Then the other things that you mentioned, the dam breach area and the Texas gas transmission line. I know I'm old, but I remember these things from 15, 16 years ago. Those were all issues that we had to consider when we looked at that land. It's a beautiful piece of land, and it may be suitable for a variety of things, but we didn't think it was the best place to put a school. And that's how the Lakeland Elementary ended up on the other side of C-Tick Road, a little further to the south, in what became the Oakwood subdivision. So when we were looking at the land for a middle school, we felt that the best site that was available at the time we had was the one in Arlington at that point, with the developer that was ready to work with us and move around there. We didn't find that here in Lakeland at that time.
Is there a reason that all the other municipalities have a high school and we don't?
Well, finding the right site at the right time, Commissioner, is part of the problem. And being able to find a way to work with all the entities we have to work with when you build a school is part of the issue. I'm not saying that Lakeland didn't have a site that a high school could be built on, but Arlington had the best site at that time that was available to the school system. And Arlington really worked very, very diligently with us to help make that a reality. So those are issues that just come into that. And it's a complex question, as I know you know. But, we looked several places here in Lakeland, but the best high school site at that time tended to be in Arlington. Road access, utility access, and the working relationship with the Arlington, their city manager, or their superintendent, as they call it.
Lastly, in all the schools you built, did you ever find that building in 2 stages was financially prudent and in the best interest of the taxpayer?
Well, anytime you're going to build in 2 phases, you generally end up going to be paying more because construction costs don't go down. interest rates usually don't go down. So whatever you build now and then have to add to later will generally cost something more. But sometimes circumstances dictate that. That may be the situation here. But you asked the question, do you save money by waiting? No, sir. Anybody thinks you're going to save money by waiting 3, 4, 5, 10 years, it'll cost less. It's just not the reality of what we found. And we manage somewhere in the neighborhood of, I guess altogether, $280 billion worth of construction. So yes, costs do go up the longer you wait.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't answer the question.
Absolutely, Dr. Mitchell, thank
I'm
you.
gonna go sit down, let the superintendent.
Well, yeah, and we appreciate you as one of our advisors, filling us in. Jealous of that applause. Yeah, you stand up. Okay, Jeff, do you want to speak to the?
Just one more thing for context before Jeff picks up, because I apologize.
Sure.
I did want to add that we had some questions, and I was reminded of this, that I didn't make this as part of my presentation. The 5 through 8 model that we're proposing, just again for context, there are more than 80 5 through 8 schools in Tennessee. That model is not even unusual locally. It's unusual, more unusual, I guess, in Shelby County, although we have had that in Shelby County schools, but it's not at all an unusual model. When we were proposing 6 through 12, that was, we were thinking outside the box a little bit, although there were very good models for that. The 5 through 8 is not only common, it's extremely common. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, we'll go to public speakers. Just name and address for the record, please, sir.
Jeff Hicks, 4294 Millwood Drive.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay.
Yes,
sir. First, a comment on something that Dr. Horrell said when he was talking about schools and size and growth. The birth cohort, I think, was the model used, but my understanding is that that doesn't really take into effect the growth of the city and people moving to Lakeland and Arlington. So one thing I will point out is in Arlington Community Schools' own document, their 5-year capital improvement plan, they reference the fact that the population in Arlington between 2000 and 2010, during one of the worst recessions in modern times, grew like 348%, and the student population grew at like 530%. So that's birth cohort doesn't take that into account. Hey, if we have tremendous growth, then the train's coming down the track. Secondly, I'd like to address Commissioner Nicholson. You asked some very pointed questions, some tough questions, and I appreciate that. And that's your job as a commissioner to do that. But I have kind of one coming back your way, and that is, have you ever spent time at Arlington? During the day while students were there?
I have been in it, yes. I've been in it twice, too.
During school hours?
Yes, during school hours.
Okay. Well, I will tell you that Dr. Allison Clark is phenomenal, and the staff and the teachers there are amazing. But students there move in somewhat military-style movements. And the reason why is because it's so crowded. I went into classrooms where band, chorus, orchestra, I got to tour all that stuff. And it almost brought me to tears, it was so good. It was amazing. But I could barely fit in the portable. I could barely fit in. Okay, so that school is bursting at the seams, and that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. Then I have Leslie Fleming. I got a card from Leslie. Do you want to speak to the school issue only, or is it the tax rate and school at the same time? Just the school. Okay, you can come on up. Name and address for the record, please. 2 minutes.
Leslie Fleming, 9349 North Burhill Drive. Arlington Middle is overcrowded. That's what we've heard substitute teachers say, that there's 35 in a classroom. For 35 in a classroom, how much attention can a student get? I do feel like Arlington has great schools. I think they have great elementary, great middle, and great high schools. but I think that we have to prepare for the future because it will be here before we know it. It takes 3 years to build a school, and at the rate that they're growing, what will happen to our children and our children's education? We've seen the numbers, and I'm very conservative, but I think that we have to look at what's best for our community, and I think this is a good compromise so that maybe we can start building back relationships and all working together for a goal. I know that everybody's for schools, but I'm definitely for this idea, and I think that it would be great for our community and for our children.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else that submitted a card that wants to speak just to schools? Raise your hand if so. If not, we'll hear you at the tax rate.
May I just close things up?
Chairman, please do. Oh, please do.
For the record, Kevin Floyd, 10245 Levy Drive. The school board sees this as first of all, I understand the significance of what we're asking to do. I understand it's an uncomfortable seat to be in, and I appreciate and recognize your service for that. Somebody's going to walk away unhappy about whatever you decide, and I appreciate your service for that. Secondly, we see this as a long-term plan to address the educational needs of our children in the city. And we believe that this will stabilize the education of Lakeland children for a long time, for the foreseeable future. And we believe that it's in the best interest of the children. And we would ask you to consider that as you're casting your vote on this matter. And with that said, thank you for your service and your time.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner.
Chairman, if you step back,
Absolutely. All right. I'll just paint a word. Go ahead.
I'm going to hit you now, okay?
Yeah.
As you well know, this has been very hard to go through. This city has suffered a lot.
Absolutely.
There has been a lot of unrest due to this issue. We need to do something to also address that. No matter what we do up here, we need to address, we being this board and the school board, really the school board should be the leader of this, is trying to find some ways to bring this group back in and heal so we're all one and not be fighting yes and no all the time. And I wish that the school board would talk and address some concerns in future meetings that would bring those people in to get them more involved in participation and not feel like that they are just have no involvement in this decision whatsoever. You follow what I'm trying to get at?
Absolutely,
Because ultimately, whatever we do, we've got to heal, and the perception is really worse now than the decision. I mean, there's so much perception out there which is being blown up all over the place, and we need to eliminate that, and I'm putting that on the school board. They need to address that and see what they can do to solve that.
Well, let me take it off the school board and put it on me. I'll take that responsibility, and I'll get with Dr. Horrell. We'll plan something similar to a town hall or something like that to give people the opportunity to discuss. But the reality is the needs don't change. And the reality is Arlington Middle is overcrowded. The reality is we only have one school. And the reality is that's not going to get any better unless we have. And that's just that's the reality. Is it a reality that any of us like? I think the answer is no. I mean, I think we all wish that Donaldson had been built in Lakeland, or that Arlington High had been built in Lakeland, and we wouldn't be having these conversations right now. But we are. And sometimes conversations are hard to have. Sometimes we have growing pains. And undoubtedly, that's where we are. And I agree with you that we need to take steps towards healing, and I'm committed to that. You're welcome.
Okay. Chairman Floyd, I actually was talking to a resident yesterday. Sorry.
That's okay.
Go with that, right? I was talking to a resident yesterday about something similar to a town hall. I guess it would be a little less formal setting, but town halls can be in pretty much any setting you want to make them. But what we did when we first came on, y'all remember we had a round table. We just sat down with people. We invited everybody to show up and just ask us any postal question they wanted to. We'd open the books and let them look and present the best information we had on hand, or we would find the answer to their question. Very informal. You didn't just raise your hand and speak, and that's it. And so I was talking to this resident about that, and she gave a thumbs up. She said, I'm from Bartlett, I'm used to communication from our elected officials, and I'd like to have better communication. That might be an opportunity for the school board and for the commissioners to sit down. We wouldn't sit up here on stage. I envision us sitting around a table with the residents and just talking, telling them, you know, what we see and what we know, and maybe that would be a less formal setting that would be more inviting to residents that may not want to speak in a setting like this or whatever. So something to think about.
Totally agree. Totally agree. We'd be willing to walk down that road with you anytime.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, commissioners, do I have any more comments on this this item? Okay, seeing none, this item will not go to the consent agenda. Obviously, major item like that. Place on the consent agenda. Let's go to next item. Madam Clerk.
Discussion of school capital projects funding options.
Okay. Jim, I believe this is you and Jessica.
Yeah, take it down. Okay, look up.
Now, while he's setting up, everybody just know that we've got school funding options. It's just the paths we can go to fund the project. It's not the budget tax rate. That'll be item number 12. So he who has submitted a card will be allowed to speak to the budget tax rate item.
Okay, thank you. So just to summarize what you just said, there's a great dual role between the school board and the BOC. I think we all understand it by now, but as the school handles the needs of the students and the school facilities, it's your responsibility to fund those facilities. So we're going to start this discussion. They have possible funding options based on the plan that was just presented to you. This is a 94-acre middle school option on the Jones site, costing just under $20 million. We ran numbers based on $20 million. We didn't dip down a little bit, but $20 million we'll run numbers on. So the options presented here, there's really two general categories. We have capital outlay notes, and we have bonds. Within the bonds, it's separated into a 20-year bond and a 30-year bond. We'll do the cost comparisons on those three options as we go forward. As I said. Now, capital outlay notes, I know that there's probably not a lot of folks too familiar with these. These have a 12-year maximum maturity. So they are a much shorter type of financing option than the 20-year and the 30. So this gives us a full range of possibilities. Okay, so it is cost. Now there's sort of a policy decision that you'll need to make in this funding. One is looking at the total project cost and go over the life of the debt service, how much it's going to cost, versus the total annual cost. Now, how you decide to go down that road is going to dictate where the tax rate should be set in order to fund it. We'll go through. So you can see the numbers, and these assumptions are from PFM. We're not looking at any growth assumptions or anything. This is this flat line. Here's the percentages moving forward. Total debt service. I'm going to capital outlay note over 12 years, looking at $27 million. That's including the $70 million of interest on that loan. Of course, this number will increase the further you push it. $32 million here and $39 million gross. So a difference of $12 million on the total project cost going through the 12-year and the 30-year cost. And you can see the related interest paying $7 million interest here versus $19 million under the 30-year bond issuance. Now, annual, of course, is much different. This is where it's going to pop up in cost. $2.2 million annually to service the $20 million, going down to over 30 years, only $1.2 million. So then you can imagine the annual input from the city be far less. Further you stretch it out, and you go back to the total cost of the project, significantly higher. And that should show that it's going from $27 million to $39 million, bringing total project cost. Interest, as I mentioned, went from $7 million to $19 million of the three options. And then flip-flop it annually. This is what it would be again: $2.2 million of service instead per year, down 1.3 million over 30 years. Now, an additional calculation that we made is look at what that tax equivalent would be. Now, we've been talking about 55 cents for a long time to be dedicated strictly to this project, or whatever the project was, coming down from the Lakeland, the original Lakeland prep, to now it's in the current budget as you have it, so we're using 55 cents as sort of that number, and then we're to adjust it here. The capital outlay note option would be a 72-cent property tax equivalent. So we need 72 cents of property tax to fund this annually. 55 cents wouldn't get us there. So we, of course, be dipping into the general fund, not the reserves, but the general fund and the remainder of the budget to make up the difference between the 55 and 72. As you go down the 20-year, looking at 51-cent tax equivalent, and over 30 or 41 cents. So they talked about beginning, you're looking at a lower annual cost. Of course, you push it up farther, going to 41 cents and possibly a tax rate decrease. And here it is again. Now let's see Grass summarize what I just said. Okay, and again, compared to the 55 cents, what does that mean? We need additional 17 cents from other sources to make up the difference to pay for the project each year. And again, that would not come out of the reserves, that would come out of general funds. We budget this extra money into the funding of the school project.
But that is the 10 cents that we already have sitting aside, so that would take 10 of it. And then the half-cent sales tax, I think when I talked to Jessica, when she explained this stuff to me right before this meeting, she said that was an equivalent of 10 cents also. Is that right?
Yeah, I try to look at it more of the revenues that are coming into a large pot into the general fund. Now, 10 cents we talked about, that's the going from the 15 cents that we give to schools. We budgeted, of course, in the original tax to do an additional 10.
Yes.
So that's the 10 she's mentioning, so that would bring up to, you could say 65 cents, how you look at it. But generally, the revenue is going to pour into a pool, we're going to pay out of that pool.
Yes, but currently we have it set up where we're taking 10 cents extra. The 15 we have to do, so that's not really in this conversation. But the 10 that we are currently saving, we could also tag that into the 55 cents, make it 65, and the half-cent sales tax that we get could completely cover this. Yes?
I think generally
Okay.
that makes sense. But in other words, we need an extra 17 cents from the 55, basically.
Yes, but we've already, my point, and I want everybody to understand, is that we're already doing that. Saving that for schools, so it wouldn't be like we're robbing another fund or taking the money from something else at this point.
Sure. And of course, going the other ways, of course, 55 cents is more than 51 and 41, based on basic math. So just for comparison's sake, I want to pull up the original Lakeland prep project, just to kind of see the comparison. And going down to the bottom line, down here, looking at these same equivalents we just talked about, 72, 51, 41, but $1.10 would have been equivalent to Lakeland prep. So you can see in the 55, we got part way, we did have to bring in more money from other sources to keep the Lakeland prep. Just saying that 72 is much less than $1.10 and doable. And this would have come out of, as Sherry said, categorizing school money. We pay for it that way, but it is doable, very doable in our budget currently.
1 second. The interest rate that you've got there on the Lakeland prep, and I'm looking at 4 point, on the capital outlay is 4 point what? 9.8. And how much are you figuring on the bond for the original Lakeland prep? Is that 5%?
5%.
We had figured though, our PFM had brought back a current bond issuance of 3.5.
Well, the estimations of the model always contemplated 5%. We felt we could do better. In fact, we were told, we confirmed that where we do this today, it was a 1.3 and change, 3.5 perhaps. And so we thought that 5% built in the model was very, very conservative, and we would in fact do better. So that's why we said,
We budget all of our debt at 5%.
Yeah. The data that during the meetings we had though, the figure that came up for the interest of the current prevailing bond issuance was 3.5%.
That's what, yeah, absolutely, that was our estimation,
Okay.
you know, that's what they said, if we did it today.
I want to make sure that what we talked about at the meeting and what you have on that 5%, that's the difference in where we came with the payout. It's the 1.5% difference in the interest. What he's using for 5%, showing $1.10, we were using at 3.5% to come up with. Thank you.
Yeah, same thing, practically. So, back to the regional failure, this is, of course, a very general summary of 3 possible options that you could choose. And when we're talking later in the budget of where you want to set that tax rate, which option you like to choose, these are I believe, our 3 best options to choose from. Are there any questions for us?
Commissioner Nixon.
Yeah, of those 3 options, or any of those options, does the public have a right to vote on any of those and turn any of those down, and speak to that?
The bond issuance, as we know, has a protest period, and that's what we went through this recently. The capital outlay notice does not have a protest period.
But you do have to pay it off in 12 years, correct?
That's correct. 12 years maximum.
And it has to be approved by the state.
And it has to be approved by the state.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, yeah, and I'll recognize any commissioners want to speak. I guess we're at the end of I wanted to wait till the end of the.
Sure.
Is it?
That's it.
Okay, got it. Grand finale, that was grand finale. Yeah. All right, well, you know, me personally, I hate paying interest. And so it appears that the 72 cents is easily affordable with the increase in the current budget. You know, if you take that pool of money we have each year from the previous tax of 85 cents, and you take this additional 55, then you're going to have enough money to cover this and not pull from our reserve funds. So that's what we understand. Okay. I don't know why we would extend it beyond for those longer periods other than just to pay additional interest or maybe limit the amount of tax we're going to raise. But I think we'd really be doing ourselves an injustice. It's kind of like almost rob Peter and pay Paul. You leave the tax and you leave the tax rate a couple of pennies lower, but the citizens long term are paying considerably more, not paying this debt off earlier. I know I live by a principle that I don't like debt in my life, and I know a lot of these commissioners really do as well. But I don't like to pay the thing off early. It's just my opinion. Commissioner Tory.
Do you foresee any negative impact on any of our day-to-day operations concerning the budget by selecting capital outlay posture?
No. Now, the budget fluctuates from year to year depending on what capital projects we have in. For example, if we start constructing New Canada Road, it's going to impact our budget. That's a short-term, hit for probably a year or so. So, but generally speaking, we could accommodate the extra in our annual budget. Yeah, clarify with the 50, if you kept the 55 cent off tax.
Okay, Commissioner Gallagher.
If we did this, when would we start paying? I know in the other model, we had a year before we had a payment. How does that work? And then also, part of the plan, I know you did say that, but the $1 million we already have for the land. So that, I know it's in here, but we already have that, so that really doesn't even need to be in that.
That sort of gets back to, harking back something we were talking about earlier. You did pass a reimbursement resolution that gives you the option of paying yourself back that $1 million. And so you can make a decision at the time of borrowing as to whether or not you want to make it $19 million or $20 million, basically, and put that money back in your new.
As far as the first payment would be the same as what we talked
So
about previously.
we would accrue money, it's what they would get, we had almost a year before we had to start payments, so this would be the same? So we would accrue money for a year or more, and we would be able to pay probably more than our first. Is there a payoff? Or do you get dinged if you pay off anything early? Yeah. One other thing, and then because while it's not in this, I'm assuming, because it usually does happen, and I've experienced it every time I've moved, because I've moved to new schools. Usually we do get new rooftops. So we should have, even slight, but we should have an increased population with the middle school, so that would help fund more of this quicker, or it could possibly.
What's the question that Commissioner Kelly asked? Is there a prepayment?
Okay. All right, this item there again will go on the agenda, not the consent agenda. That's a discussion item, so are we we're going to present a resolution on that, or what are we going to, how are you going to direct that? Are you going to direct that?
I think it's more of a discussion item. What I would contemplate is a decision on the budget occurring this month, and if we go forward with construction and funding for whatever vehicle, that would be taken up at the earliest in July.
I don't know. I mean, is it possible to get something together? Because it seems like it would be a fairly easy decision for me. I don't know if the board would support it, but I'd support the paying less interest. If we can pay it in our budget, putting this after we pass our budget, everything, we get everything in a row. And if we do pass the 55 cents, if we do pass the school capital plan, assuming all that happens, we have a resolution waiting to create or to select the funding mechanism. And I don't know why we would delay. Would there be I mean, if there's a logical reason, I'm okay with it.
I would prefer we should and we'll talk about that perhaps in executive session in July.
Okay.
At least until July.
Okay. All right.
After this meeting, or?
We can have an executive session after the meeting. That'd be fine. I don't want to tie folks in here.
I have one.
Okay.
Directed to Dr. Horrell. The plan that you have, what would you estimate, or have you come up with a proposed date for? I know everything is predicated on acquisition of the property. After acquisition of the property or designation of the site, how much of a time frame delay would it be before we would actually start groundbreaking and or have to start the borrowing process?
This is noted, it's fairly small up at the top, but these cost estimates and really the plan is predicated on the idea that the bids would be received. So we already have the construction documents and bids for construction received no later than the first quarter of 2016. So and then the plan would be to open the school in 2018.
If I might, Dr. Carl.
Please, yeah.
That's correct. Your question, I think, is when would you need to start paying the contractor?
Correct. That's
More than likely.
when would the interest clock start
Dr.
ticking?
Mitchell, I'm sorry, Dr. Mitchell, do you mind coming up here? We got a recorder, and she's got to listen to all this stuff and write it down and stuff like that. So thank you.
The superintendent's exactly right. This is suggested time to open bids on this project in the first quarter of 2016. By the time the contractor got mobilized and was on the site and submitted first draw, that's what they call it, construction draw. You're probably talking about you would need to have cash in hand to pay that person, that contractor, probably no later than May of next year. 11 months or so from now.
So we will have this year's revenue and part of next year's to offset part of this interest cost that we're accruing.
So I think that's a question for Mr. Hackett.
That's what I was trying to determine. How much lead time, the basis for 55-cent initiation would give us. We'd have that banking ability of that to offset the total amount that we have to borrow.
All of those factors would come into play, but you would not expect to be paying a contractor.
You follow me?
Yes, I'd not be expecting to pay a contractor until maybe April or May next year.
Well, most contractors are going to ask for an upfront starting and then basing their draws, correct?
They asked for it, but I never agreed.
You never did.
No, we'd like to see the actual work in progress, certified by the architect, certified by a project manager, and then we approve giving a check to a contractor for the drawings. Yes, sir.
We would continue to pay our design team for the preparation of the construction.
You have to do that, but you make progress payments to contractors based on work that's done.
Tangibility or payability.
Yes.
I told you should set up front, Doctor. All right, so. Yeah, that's right. All right. Any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, then we'll have an executive session following this, just to allow our attorney to brief us on that reason. Madam Recorder, item number 5.
Presentation of 2014-2015 Lakeland School System Budget Adjustments.
Okay, these 5 and 6, can we make these really quick?
But there's no action required, it's just a presentation stuff.
Okay. Yeah, still, can we make these really quick?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is the 14-15. This should be very quick. Basically, this is part of just keeping the school system fiscal house in order. We did have a slight change to the 14-15 budget that I'm required to present to you. And essentially, we gained some additional revenue that I wanted to spend this summer on a network upgrade at the school. We received $38,987 from the state for technology enhancement. And I have added that in the revenue column and also added it to the special services technology expenses column. And then the other change is I am pulling out $20,000 to both account for a loss of about $8,300 in our cafeteria this year. We did catch that we were losing money about halfway through and made an adjustment. And but we also want to be able to cover that and also put some seed money in next year's nutrition fund. So basically, we increased revenue by $38,987 for the 14-15 this year, and then we added that as an expense and also added the reduction of $10,000 to the cafeteria fund. So I'm just presenting that to the board, and then Ms. Millspot, they approve that? So it's just a presentation. Okay. Fairly fast.
Okay, item number 6, Madam Recorder.
Presentation of 2014-2015 general fund budget adjustments.
Okay.
Ours is similar. We just had a few things that we're not amending the bottom line of the general fund budget or any of the budgets. We're just moving money from accounts, whether it be moving from supplies to travel or minor adjustments like that, to other things like using unspent funds for that were budgeted for the Canada Road engineering that we're not going to spend through that phase is complete. Moving that to pay for the special election so that we don't have to do a budget amendment for that. I think that was the largest of the adjustments. We did get that cost back.
Okay. Any questions? None?
What did you say, the election cost, is that what you just said?
Special election.
How much was it?
Around 40, a little over 43,000.
Okay. Thank you. You're multitasking. We got you busy. Like when I went to Mo's Day, I made my stuff and then checked me out.
Yeah.
I was like, man, come on. All right, so item number 7.
Discussion on amended contracts for public services.
Okay.
So I had our monthly meeting yesterday with public services to go over, the basic service and the issues coming up. And Gary Burke, as you know, made a comment like, "Boy, I haven't been in front of the Lakeland POC in a long time." Probably a good thing, maybe. Anyway, this goes back to the contract that we signed last year. There are two glaring omissions in that contract I think we all understand. It's the unlimited yard waste bags that's now limited to 2 bags per cart, and the every week recycling. As we all know, right now recycling is every other week. So Republic put together an estimate for me for both those services and adding on to our existing contract and have those numbers. Okay, so this basically, the current rate that we pay is $15.54. That's how much we pay Republic, the basic rate under the contract. The added services would be an additional $2.55 for the every week recycling, and an additional $3.80 for the unlimited yard waste bags. These are separate estimates, so you can choose one, you can choose both, or none moving forward. Now here's the summary of what this means. Over the left-hand column is our current. We have 44,034 customers currently, and that goes all the way across. We're at $15.54. We pay them $62,000 per month, $752,000 per year. We have a solid waste budget surplus of $283,000. Now, there's a lot of things that factor into that surplus, obviously. It's how much we pay them and what the other items that we pay out of the solid waste fund. As you remember, this is a separate fund from the general fund, the solid waste fund. So we have a couple employees where their salaries come out of this fund. We have the litter pickup coming out of this fund. So there's a lot of different factors that go into what that surplus is. But that's our current surplus under the current budget. If we added every week recycling, the rate would go to $18.09. This is just every other week recycling added onto our current rate. You see the numbers going down. That would reduce our surplus to $160,000, but we still have a surplus. If we added unlimited yard waste bags by itself, without the every week recycling, the rate would be $19.34. You can see, all numbers down again, we still have a surplus of just under $100,000 in that fund. If we added both services, is where we get to the red. If we had both services in, new rate would be $21.89. We'd be in the red, $23,000, a little $23,000. So now there's ways to make up for that. If we choose to do both services, we can of course look at other items in that budget to reduce, so we don't have to raise rates. Of course, we never recommend raising resident rates to pay for these services. I mean, they pay a fair share now. We wouldn't want to increase that, of course. So we look for other ways to adjust the solid waste budget to bring that down. What I would say, and we had this talk, I believe last month, about the need for the every week recycling versus the need for yard waste. I think clearly based on, from citizen comments, complaints that we get at City Hall, the yard waste issue is by far more significant than the recycling issue. So if you were to choose one out of the two, I would recommend choosing the yard waste option to add that on to the existing contract, which would be third column here. But the rate goes to 1934,
I'll go to commissioners before I speak. Commissioner Gallup?
The elephant, or whatever the thing is called, is it elephants?
Well, the equipment similar to the elephant vac.
Elephant back. That 99,000, I mean, would that cover the person that does that and?
Oh, yeah, easily.
Okay.
And that's already budgeted. This is surplus after we account for those costs.
Oh, okay. What was our rate before we went down and got rid of all this stuff? Wasn't it 21 something then?
I don't know the history, I have to look that up.
I thought it was that 21 because this is the rate that they charge 24 or
It
something.
it was over $21 because we were looking at the difference between what we were collecting and what we had. We had a very small reserve. And matter of fact, whenever we had the relief programs and the other stuff, I think we actually dipped into that. So that's whenever that was kind of my question on the earth, that when we let this contract out to Republic, we had 3 other bids. Were the bids all consistent with the every other week?
Yeah,
Because they were doing their recycling with the truck and a driver, where he would get out and take it up. It wasn't with his arm. They were using the whatever the size was for the, now they're doing it all automatically, or mechanized. Is this, I guess the real question is it worth us looking at, based on the needs of the citizens, and we run into this all the time in the fall with the leaves and the problematic concerns of picking these multiple bags with people with lots of trees, and we wind up creating more of a problem for our public works people than we would probably do. And we thought of looking at putting another contract out and finding out what this would come up with, as opposed to just asking Republic, since they do have a contract, and they do, in essence, have the upper hand on this.
We have not looked into that. I mean, you're talking about just for the yard waste bags, separate
I'm
from
talking about overall reopening the bid for all of our solid waste pickup, as opposed to having them come up and give us a piecemeal entree type of thing, where we pick out what we want. And is this their absolute best that they will offer to do this for? With the understanding that we may have to look at opening the bid up again, which is another, it's another process which I'm sure we'd like to avoid.
Yeah, it's permitted in the contract to do that. It'd be difficult. We just got done doing that. Remember, we terminated the last contract early, rebid it. We're not even done with the first year of the new contract, the 3-year contract. So if we don't want to keep on terminating contracts every year of 3-year contracts. So I think that would be more problematic. Let me talk about it as a slight wrinkle that was thrown in yesterday. I want to comment on. Of course, there's always a wrinkle. Every year, under a contract, every year they reevaluate the rate that they charge us, and it's based on an index that generally considers fuel costs and where that index is. So when Jerry was telling me this yesterday, he prepared me for the worst. Well, actually, there's a decrease in the rate that's coming to us under this contract. It goes down 60 cents from what it is right now in the rate. So going up from $15.54 down 60 cents, that would be our new rate that we have the option of taking going forward, which of course we want to do that. However, because they're going to take a hit on fuel over the year, they're going to have to redo our yard waste quote up 60 cents to make it a net wash. Now that's when we get into negotiation whether or not we can get them down to a better deal. So if we were to take a lower rate and opt for that, what's in our contract, we can do that. His yard waste quote is going to have to go up, so net wash on the total cost.
Let me follow up with this. The yard waste problem is it's really not a 12-month-a-year impact, is it?
It's close, because sometimes you have grass clippings, fall you have leaves, and really all winter you have leaves. People collect leaves and put leaves out at different times, depending on where they are, how many trees they have. That's what we experienced this year at least. And as you know, the loose leaf collection program implemented last fall was strictly a Band-Aid fix for this. So but they spent a lot of time collecting loose leaf, and that wasn't a viable option. But you get past the leaf time of year, you get into the grass clippings, which is equally the same.
Commissioner Young?
So I think it was 380, if I wrote this down somewhere, or whatever the yard waste. So he's telling you that it would be 60 cents upon that for the yard waste?
Yes, if we chose the lower rate, and he said that's to cover his cost, because the index got real low this year.
I guess where my disconnect is, like Gene said, they used to have 3 trucks and people. Now they have 1 truck that puts both things in it. They have to save costs on that, and I'm assuming that's why we got a lower cost. But, I mean, less gas, less, if you look at all the operations expenses, it's just much less to them. I can't imagine that, why they'd have to tax 60 cents onto that. If that is the cost, if we don't take that, and they can give it to us at 380, it's just a game.
here's my problem, is we built a provision into the contract to either work to their benefit, neutralize any increase in fuel, or work to our benefit, we take advantage of cost reductions, or it remains neutral. If their cost goes up, they're obviously going to exercise that. We're not going to have any choice but to pay it. But if their cost goes down, if the index goes down, we now can't take advantage of our, because we're looking, we can't take advantage of this provision because we're looking at adding services. I mean, seriously, they can add the services at $3.80. Now that makes me returned enough to bid it again in a year. I mean, so if they can do it for $3.80, and this is a provision of the contract, their index shows their cost going down. They agreed to it. We don't have any option not to pay them. They don't have any option, in my mind, not to honor the contract. This is a totally separate issue. Trying to tag the two together, trying to marry the two doesn't make sense to me. I will say this, that I think it's a no-brainer to do yard waste. I would be very surprised if we don't have substantial support on the mission to do the yard waste, just simply because, we piloted the loose leaf program, and that's a successful program in larger cities like Bartlett or Cairo or whatever that have a lot of manpower and trucks. When, our manpower, we just didn't have the manpower and trucks to handle it. And we found that out very quickly. And so that is a no-brainer. I asked for some information on the recycle stuff, and I wasn't in a position to say no to it at the time, but I did want to ask for some follow-up. Did we determine how many people, was it like less than 100 people that had asked for additional recycle containers out of 4,000 or whatever?
The bigger picture, about 50% of the customers recycle at all that have the cars made recycled. Of that 50%, about 100 have asked for a second recycling car.
Okay. So about 100 out of 2,000 active recycling households, and 4,000 total.
That's correct.
Roughly. So in my mind, it really doesn't indicate a demand to increase that service. And when we went to these larger containers, even though we went to every 2 weeks as opposed to every week, we went to a large container. Then we actually increased the capacity that we have.
Yeah, the recycling numbers are going up under the new contract.
Yeah, and so we have more capacity though in that container over a 2-week period than we did in that smaller container over a 2-week period. So we even though we're picking up once every 2 weeks, we still have more capacity net than we had prior to. So and looking at this, if we went to the 380, we still have we're still 100,000 too good. Where the other we gotta adjust the contract and potential services. If we can afford to adjust the contract down to absorb some potential services, I think we ought to do it anyway. Maybe reduce the contract. But if they try to marry that 60-cent increase to this deal, then they might find themselves on the auction block.
And that's an option, clearly not.
Right. Commissioner Plunk and then Commissioner Gallo.
It's hard for me to work with people I don't trust, and I don't trust this company. It seems everything always goes to their favor. And at this point, I'd say rebid it, because I just don't trust it.
My question is for Chris. If you currently have a contract, you can't go and ask companies for a bid unless you break that contract, can you?
Well, the process in this will be the same as we did last time. We would put them on notice. I can't remember the notice provision off the top of my head. 90 days, 6 months.
60 or 90 days.
60, 90 days. And then during that time, we rebid it. As you saw last time, they bid again. Again, I don't want to speak to what breaches the contract from our perspective. But you do have there is a mechanism for you to put this back out to bid if that is something you're inclined to do.
Yes, but that's telling them that they're terminated and then they could bid again just like we did. My question was, can we talk to someone else and get a bid while we're already using them? Is that legal? Sure.
I don't have the contract in front of me. It's been a while since I've reviewed it. I don't recall a provision that would somehow.
Well, I didn't know if it was a government thing, because
No.
government works much different than a business. A business can do it anytime. But we did have a company contacted me, and I forwarded it to Jim, and they're doing Arlington's now. So they're interested in giving us a bid. I just didn't know if it was legal or not, the way the government runs.
I guess the question would be, do we have to offer them formal termination before we even implement a bid process? I
I
assume.
suppose I'd like to review that
Yeah.
contract.
Okay.
And get back with you on that tomorrow.
Very good. Commissioners, we have any other input on this? I expect we'll see this again. Yes, sir. Commissioner.
We just had one sit-down negotiation with Jerry on this.
Yeah, this is new information. The index came out yesterday, so he presented to us yesterday, but brand new. I mean, before yesterday, it was very clear, I think, what our options were under the contract. You know, when the index, going down, and under all circumstances, I'd say we want that reduction in rate. Now, the yard waste is not currently under the contract, so, he's tying them together. The contract doesn't tie them together. We can clearly take the reduction in rate as per the contract and move it down 60 cents.
Based on the discussions that we've had tonight, do you think it would be prudent and both parties benefit to call him and say, we need to sit down and talk about this based on what has been transpired tonight?
I could invite him next week if you'd like to speak to the board.
You're wonderful to see, Jerry.
Yeah, I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah.
And the reason we have this up now, of course, is it gives us direction on the budget. We have budgeted a certain amount for solid waste collection. And if we increase that cost, we'll make sure we make the proper budget adjustment for next year's budget.
One more question. Whatever we have left over, is that excluding what we're paying for trash pickup on the side of the road? Or would that come out of this reserve?
No, that's already accounted for.
So, okay.
This is over and above.
So everything that we do right now for trash is accounted for, and that's reserve money.
That's correct.
And then the other comment, he charges, if we're only recycling 2,000 customers, and everybody gets dinged because is charged for the total population, it would be the same if every single person in the city recycled?
Yes.
But yet, half the people recycle want to do it on a weekly basis, and it would be more money. That's kind of disconnected to me,
But they are collecting more recycling than they used to collect under the contract.
I get it, but the way the contract is, I mean, if every single person recycled and filled it to the max, then it would be this charge, but if the half of the people want another pickup, then they want more.
Yeah.
So.
That's right.
All right. Any other discussion on public services? All right. Trash that. Just joking. All right. Item number 8.
Discussion on sewer wastewater rates for fiscal year 2016.
You can light up.
Jim Atkins. Jim.
Okay, this is the one we discussed last month, and I think we talked about it probably last fall when Steve White from MTS came here and talked to this board about possibly adjusting our sewer rate structure. Now, this is for all of our sewer customers, and the rates are based on water usage. You can see our current rates that we have in our fee schedule. Base fee is $31.50. That's for the first 6,000 gallons. Over above 6,000, you pay 1.27 per CCF with a cap at $46. That's our current fee structure. Now, as Steve White talked to you about the first time he was here, last time he was here, was that this is very irregular to do it this way. And there's other ways of doing it to possibly increase sewer revenue into this fund, into our sewer fund. What he talked about that night and what we would like to study further is possible restructuring our fee schedule, what that could look like. Of course, there's a lot of blanks here, so we haven't done the study yet. Leaving the base rate the same, but changing the gallon threshold. He suggested to you a while back 2,000 gallons, which is more standard. We would like to study it on 2, 3, and 4,000 gallons to see how the numbers work out. Also possibly adjusting the $1.27, probably adjusting it upwards so the heavier water users would be paying more for that water they use. One thing on the cap, and of course we removed the cap under this as he suggested. He seemed to indicate that putting a cap on it, the heavy water users aren't paying their fair share of sewer rate. So what that would be, removing the cap, you actually pay for what you're using. Now, what Steve suggested when we met with him here a couple weeks ago is that we implement this new structure, move it forward a year, and then collect the data over the year and kind of see where we end up after a year, knowing that we did increase revenue somewhat. I would offer a second option, was give us as staff, myself and Jessica, about 2 months or so, maybe 3, to do a study based on the past 12 months, apply a new structure, different options on a new structure, to what would have happened if those were in place, and see where we are, and then make a recommendation on how we could adjust if we want to adjust moving forward over time. Because right now, the money we collect, we're just at about the break-even point. We're still paying off the sewer plant for another 11 years. So right now, we're at that break-even point. So any increase in revenue would be good.
Last month when I asked for this to be looked at, I didn't realize there was a cap on the maximum. So you're telling me that I guess a previous board would have placed a cap on it, or how would that have happened? Like somebody, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody uses 10,000 gallons of water and that's our cap.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go, anything beyond that 10,000 gallons, they're actually rewarded by getting free water.
They pay no more than $46, no matter how much water they use.
So $46, they can use 30,000 gallons a month and pay $46.
Right.
That's unbelievable. So we potentially reward someone who would, yeah, that's crazy. Is that, I don't even know, is that legal? Is that legal for us to give?
Steve had questions of legality, but we're not sure.
Yeah, man, I don't know. Citizens, you might want to go fill your lake up before we change it. I don't understand how this was, but certainly need to change it, I think. All right.
So if you would allow us to have probably 2 or 3 months and bring back to you again with hard data and see where we are at that point, then we can adjust the rate accordingly. We're suggesting possibly a January 1 start date for a new rate. That gives time to study it, get in front of you, and adjust the ordinance accordingly.
Yeah, you can fill your lake up for $46. All right, any questions, comments? Seeing none, Commissioner Todd.
I would like to add my endorsement to looking at giving you guys a couple of months to look at this and come back with a graduated schedule and how we'll handle deleting the maximums where people are paying for usage over.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. Madam Reporter, item number 9.
Discussion on fire study by impasse.
The fire study asked that there be a fire study, what I call a fire study, conducted back in, I believe, October. And so that's continued on. And there's a lot of information together, and they don't have it prepared for this meeting. We should have it maybe as early as our July meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct?
That sounds good.
Okay.
This is a study done by MTAS. They're doing a study.
Okay. The Municipal Technical Advisory Service is collecting the data, and so the figures should be finalized, presented in July. Here's what, and a lot like we talked about with the board, the school board, when we went through planning and capital planning and operating planning. One of the things we need to have in Lakeland is a plan. We need to paint a clear vision of where we're taking the city, and this is one of those items that's kind of one of the gorillas in the room. Obviously, education is the 800-pound gorilla. This may be the 500-pound, a little bit smaller gorilla, but it's still a big one. And so we talk about a way we could bring the people together behind something. The only way I think we could bring people together behind a tax increase that oppose a tax increase is to show them light at the end of the tunnel where you're going to receive some relief. And the idea behind bringing the fire service in-house, and I think the figures will bear this out, is that there will be relief. If we can eliminate our fire fee, and over a period of time, I'm wanting to be realistic. I don't know if that's going to be 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, but I would suspect somewhere in that time frame that we bring this service in-house, that we can eliminate that fire fee and bring it under that current property tax that I suspect is going to be established next week. And that would relieve the residents of an equivalent, and I've heard new figures as high as 65 cents. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How do you come to that figure?
That's just simply taking the total amount of money we pay Shelby County, or the residents pay Shelby County, divided by the percent tax equivalent to come up with the approximate tax rate. To completely replace that fee, about $2.2 million, would be about 65 cents, 67 cents.
Okay, about 65 or 67 cent equivalent. So that's on average what we're paying as taxpayers, ratepayers in Lakeland. So we take that and we can build that. If we can incorporate that through growth, we would do that through growth. Obviously, as if we build a school and our housing market expands and creates a demand for commercial, then our economy grows, and from that growth, then I assume we would potentially have the revenues to bring this service in-house. Plus, the amount we're paying in fees is substantially more, hundreds of thousands more, we suspect, than what we could operate this for in-house, either with a partnership with a neighbor, such as Arlington, or bringing it in-house, we could potentially save hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, Commissioner Torrey, I know, has been working on this since he was an employee here, I think over 8 years roughly, been working on what's called a fire district. We had an opportunity when I was on the Shelby County Board of Commissioners to serve on a committee together, studying the fire district and whatever in a cooperative agreement with Shelby County, Millington, and Arlington. But I think on the smaller scale, you could scale that down to possibly do something like create a fire district between the two cities. That is what we've asked MTAS to do. One option to study, and the other option would be what it would take to bring it in-house. And so you can expect that's going to be forthcoming. And the plan is to bring that through our growth and our budgets over the years, to bring that in-house, eliminate that fire fee, and that will be hopefully seen as and that another benefit of that is you're paying it as a tax instead of a fee. You get to write it off on your income tax, and so there is a tax benefit for your income tax, and we eliminate that fee. I understand that for quite some time you're going to be paying the tax and the fee, but our ultimate goal will be to incorporate that, I hope, under the current tax and give some relief to the residents. That's my spiel. Does anybody have anything to add? I guess we can expect the discussion, the presentation.
Yeah, the data and the study is definitely going to help from MTAS and then the work that Commissioner Torrey has done in the past. I mean, clearly we need to do something about fire, or at least have a plan to do something at some point. Put it on the radar at least. So, that'll be forthcoming.
Very good. All right, and so we'll discuss that more at a future meeting. Madam Reporter, item number 10.
Ordinance final reading, and ordinance establishing a debt service fund for the city of Lakeland, Tennessee.
Okay. Now, this is final reading. We've had two discussions. There are third. Does anybody have anything to add to this? Let's see none. The ordinance, I guess it can go on the, well, that's pretty big deal. Let's not stick on the consent agenda. That'll be on the regular agenda. Next item, please.
Ordinance final reading, an ordinance of the city of Lakeland, Tennessee to rescind ordinance 14-216 to establish a special property tax.
Same here. Our attorneys advised us on this, and we probably don't need to put it on the consent agenda. We have any other discussion on that. I think it's pretty routine matter. Next item, please.
Ordinance final reading, an ordinance of the city of Lakeland, Tennessee adopting the annual budget and tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July July 1, 2015, and ending June 30, 2016.
Okay. Y'all want me to go to the citizens first? You want me to go to the citizens first? Okay. Then I'm just going to take them in order. Let's see, Sharon Helms. Sharon Helms.
Last night, do I have to go first today?
I'm sorry.
I went first last night.
Okay, I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. You're right. Okay. I'm going to put you at the end because I gave the same courtesy to gentlemen last time. Lou Melton.
Bingo.
All right.
Lou Melton, 9584 Private Point. My first question is, when did the agenda change the platform that you ran on, which was no taxes, and now it has gone to no regard to the amount of debt, and we've got new taxes? That's my first question to you. The second thing I want to say is that the way that this was presented to the citizens of Lakeland is what I did is yes versus no. The time for a town hall was before, not after. We don't need to be dumping it on Mr. Floyd here. The problem is the responsibility that's right up here, in my opinion. The next thing I want to say is that I realize that the agenda has been set, and I've already voiced all of my concerns about it, especially the financial stress that it's going to place on the city. But what we all in this room want is the best education for all of these children that we have, regardless of whether they're in Lakeland Elementary, Donaldson Elementary, Arlington Middle, or Arlington High. I feel like we have, the way that this has been presented, the way that this has been done, it has put a strain on the relationship of our sister city. Hearing him talk tonight about possibly a breach, how does he know, how they're going to react when he goes back from the interlocal? This was not handled professionally at all, in my opinion. So lastly, I'm going to ask you to be good stewards with the money, because you have a fiduciary responsibility to all of the citizens of Lakeland. And what we really, really need right now, more than anything, is we need leadership. And that leadership needs to be honesty, transparency, trustworthiness, and integrity. But the citizens cannot buy that for you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Linda Miller. And Lou, by the way, just one of the answers to your question, we can't get to all of them right now, but one of the answers to your question, we had about 11 or 12 town hall meetings when we initiated the process back last August. Thank you. All right, Linda Miller. Name and address for the record.
Linda Miller, 3217 Seaway Lane. That's in Sterling Place. I'm representing a bunch of retired people living on Social Security, and we've talked about this before, how this is a big hit, and I've heard from many people in my subdivision that if this goes through and all this taxes goes out, that they're going to have to sell their houses. I'm afraid that what's going to happen is that we're going to lose people in Lakeland. Because when I moved here, which is not quite 2 years ago, we didn't have a property tax. And I remember a realtor telling me that, and I was like, woo-woo, okay. Then, first year, the next year we had a property tax. Now this one is just huge. And people's house payment, mortgage payments, and taxes and all that are just, it's very difficult. And I did not understand, we had a special election, $43,000 it cost. What did it accomplish? The people voted no. I don't understand. If it was voted no, how could you all just keep going through it and doing what you're doing? So when she talks about integrity and honesty and everything, yeah, that's what the people are worried about. They think there's something going on that's not, you're not honest and forthright about it. And what a lot of people want is like a line item, kind of like what they did on the school, where the line item was, this is gonna cost, and this is gonna cost. We'd like to know where the money's going. Where did our tax money go 2 years ago? Where did our tax money go last year? Is this 55-cent tax rate gonna go strictly for the schools? I moved here, I couldn't believe it, we don't have a library, we don't have a post office, community center. We don't have any of that. And it's like, well, where's our money going? I mean, I know it's going for certain things, but I would like, and other people in my subdivision would like a line item, you know. Fire service, yeah, that was another one. So I'm just afraid that when people come to Lakeland and find out that we're going to have the second highest tax rate in the state. No, that's not true. That's what's going around.
I understand. It's just a rumor. Don't believe everything on one.
No, I know.
15 seconds over.
Okay.
That's okay.
So
No, you can finish out.
I'm just worried that when you say we're going to grow, I'm afraid it's going to have the opposite effect, that people are going to come and the realtors are going to say, well, now this is the tax rate, but this is high compared to Arlington and Eads and I don't know my way around a lot, but anyway, Cordova, they're going to say, I can't afford that.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid we're going to go down and our revenue's going to go down
Right.
rather than go up, which is what we're hoping for.
Yeah. We wouldn't even have the second highest tax rate in Shelby County, much less the state. Let me add something else. The budget items you're asking for, the line by line,
Right.
that's available to you. Public Records Act in Tennessee requires that be available to you, and so we can get you access to that. If you can get with the city manager,
It's actually on the agenda for tonight.
it's on the agenda. So all that's available. Commissioner Torrey, I know you were working one time on trying to get us a post office, which requires zip code or something. Can you fill me in on kind of what they told you? You told me a reason why they couldn't do that.
I spent about 4 years working on getting a dedicated zip code for Lakeland. And I spoke personally with the Postmaster General of D.C. Spent a lot of time with Senator Alexander's aide. They won't issue us one because they're not expanding their zip codes. And they won't build us a post office nor assign us a separate zip code because of that. So we've tried to do this at length.
Okay. I hope that answered your question. We are trying to answer some questions as we go along. We'll probably get more in depth in our discussion here coming up, or at least next week. Okay, Commissioner Paul.
Just quickly, but where was the outrage 2 years ago when the previous administration passed this first tax, the 85 cents? Where was the outrage then? Now it's all of a sudden we're the bad guys, you know?
Okay.
It was passed without us knowing it.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that you know every month, there's the general fund, all the statements are online every month, updated every month, so you can go and look on the agenda and click on those, and the reports are on there every single month.
Okay. All right. Good enough. I want to keep the discussion productive. I know there's tension in the air. I can feel it. Trust me, I'm in a hot seat. One of the five.
Let's just finish.
Well, yes, sir. Commissioner Plum.
And you're right, people are leaving, and they're gonna continue to leave. I know a lot of people, where are they going? They're going to those people that have schools, the towns that have schools, like Collier, Germantown. They're going out there in droves because of the schools. Nobody's gonna move to Lakeland. For what? I mean, we're not gonna have a school here. We're talking about having a school in what, 20 years now? Yeah, right. So, there's gonna be a lot of people believing it. Trust me.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Plunk. I have Sherry Willis. Sherry? Name and address for the record, please.
Sherry Willis, 10089 Thanks, Road. I am a resident of Lakeland, but have no impact by school because I have no children or grandchildren who will be attending middle school. My relationship with the school system is just substitute teaching at Arlington Middle School. What I want to share is that I'm in favor of implementing the 55-cent tax. I want the money used for schools. I want to adopt the LSB CIP plan for middle school, and I want to build the school on the Jones Park.
And that reminded me of another, Ms. Miller, another one of your questions or concerns. Is the money going to be dedicated to a school? If you look down the agenda, a couple of items, there is a resolution to dedicate, if it does pass, that's why it's after the budget and tax rate, if it does pass, there will be a resolution to dedicate this strictly towards school capital. Okay. Hope that answers it. Jay Dorn, Jay? Name and address for the record, please, sir.
I already said it, but it's getting on, I live at 9361 Lakeland Drive. I'm going to say basically the same thing Sherry said. You know, I get up here and I hear all the complaining about 85 cents. No one told us about it. I voted. I don't know where these people been. I came here last night because somebody showed up last night and said, this is the first meeting I've been to. But I'm going to complain about what everybody else has been telling me. You know what? I don't have any kids in the school system, but I was at the school board meetings last night. You know, if you want to be involved in the situation, you got to show up. Don't just show up when your taxes go up. Well, why are my taxes going up? Be involved. You know, and so, you know, I'll call the personal attacks. People call me a coward on Facebook because I question their motives. I'm still here. I'm the only coward still standing here. So go back and tell all your no friends that I'm still here. And I am not leaving. So if you want to meet me in the parking lot, like some of you said, I'll be in the parking lot. I have no problem with that. But I'm for favor of the tax. I get no benefit of it. I have a 22-year-old. That's it. But if you don't educate these kids, just the same things I said at the first meeting and the town hall meeting that we did have, you will have the same problems with us. I was the school officer there. When the enrollment got up to 2,400, we could literally not walk down the hallway. And that's what's happening in Arlington Middle. That's the exact reason why my son didn't go to Arlington Middle for 1 year. Everyone says Arlington has a great education. I don't know. My son went to MUS. Okay? So I'm just going to tell you, get the education. They need the education. We need the school. I don't like paying any more taxes. God, we've got to educate them, or they're going to steal from us, and they're not going to leave this area with good education. We're going to go off to college and fail. I don't want that to happen. Smaller schools succeed. Just a fact. And that's what I want. And I'll pay for it. Thank you.
By the way, don't take the parking lot bait because he's a police officer. All right, so Wendy Sebastian.
Wendy Sebastian, 10129 Oak Seed Lane. I'm standing before you tonight asking you to vote for the 55-cent property tax. I never in my life ever thought that I would be begging, asking for a tax, but here we are. No one likes taxes, but unfortunately they are necessary. At the school board meeting last night, we heard a comparison of students, and we actually heard this tonight as well, student enrollment at Arlington Middle and other municipal middle schools. I found the numbers shocking. Arlington Middle was by far the largest middle school. This showed that adding on to Arlington Middle should not even be an option for us. Then I heard that middle school size is tied to academic performance, and a larger school can actually have a negative effect on student performance. Arlington Middle is a great school, but it is too large and will continue to be unless we build our own middle school. The information provided to us last night and tonight as well was not only from Dr. Harrell and our school board members, but two very successful former superintendents of Shelby County and Tipton County schools. After everything presented at last night's school board meeting, I am even more convinced now that we need a middle school and we need this property tax to get it.
Michelle Dowell. Name and address for the record.
I'm Michelle Dial, and I live at 9054 Breckenridge Cove. I'm standing before you today as a single parent. I've lived in Lakeland since 1999, and when I bought my house, I did realize I was getting a deal by not paying local property taxes. However, my grandparents, who were rice farmers and educators, taught me early on to always contribute to my future and always invest in my future, be it my own personal future, by taking care of my health and getting a good education and doing what I could to be a good citizen, to invest in the community that I live in, by being a volunteer, by doing the things that I can to help my community be a better place to live, and of course, to contribute to my church by tithing and volunteering there as well. This investment, which boils down to a $16 monthly increase based on the assessed value of my home, is just going to be a mere sacrifice of maybe a couple of Wendy's burgers. And I know that some people look at that in a different way based on their income situation, but I am a single income earner in my home, raising a teenage son who's trying to find his way in the world, which if you have a teenage son, 20 years old, you know what I'm talking about. Our investment in this school is not only about building the school, but being able to have local control of this school. I was one of the first teachers to open Lakeland Elementary School, and I'm very proud of the time that I spent there as a teacher. I've left to go on to further my career, and I'm an assistant principal now. And I see even more the value of what a good school system has to offer for the community that it is in. I can't believe the hatred and the negativity and all of the things that have come about as a result of this referendum. It has divided neighbors, and I just want to be a positive voice for all of you and to let you know that I embrace you and commend you for everything that you have put up with. And I urge you to keep on your bulletproof vests and try to attract the naysayers and be a positive force for this community to lead us into a better future.
Okay, Nancy Hartz. Just name and address for the record, please, ma'am. Name and address for the record, please, ma'am.
I've only been here 20 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Nancy Marks, 3822 Piper Bay Cove. First thing I want to say is, Tori, I want to quote you, not a smart way to spend our money, and that's what I feel like we're doing right now. Back in the day in 2006, when we had commissioners that loved us, we would come in and they would move the thing that we were going to speak on the agenda up to number 1. We'd speak on it and leave, and you didn't have to look at us all night. But this is such a rinky-dink right here. PA system. I can't hear anything. I didn't hear almost nothing that Dr. Mitchell said or anybody that's turned this direction. So if we can afford a $29 million school, you would think that we could upgrade our microphone and our speaker. Now, let me get on to what I was. First thing we need to do is stop. We need a plan. You're talking, I mean, the mayor's talking about plan, Tori's talking about plan. It doesn't sound like the city, the BOC, and the school board all has a plan that fits in together. Secondly is debt limits. We need debt limits. Thirdly, they compared us again to Germantown and Collierville. Germantown has 45 or 40,000 people. Collierville has 40. Lakeland has 12. Lakeland and Arlington together would only be half of Germantown and Collierville. And Dr. Mitchell was the one on Shelby County Board that put 14 kids in portables at Farmington that are still in those portables now. And I'm sure that's the reason that 100% of them don't go to Yale or Harvard. They go to University of Tennessee, University of Memphis. They go to Mississippi State. But these are the things that I'm thinking about, and it doesn't look like anybody. We spent more time, or the board spent more time tonight talking about garbage and the sewage than they did on how we're going to finance $20 million. I am embarrassed, of the
Ms. Hart.
willful.
Ms. Hart, 2 minutes. You can finish up.
I am embarrassed of the willful, you've messed me up now, I've lost my train of thought. We're gonna have the highest property tax in this end of the state, which will decrease our home values, which we won't even get the kids to be able to fill the school. I think we need to go back, we need to stop, we need to not build anything.
Ms. Hart.
See what's going on.
That's it. Thank you. I think we've identified the source of the rumor for the one that had the property tax question earlier. The other thing is that we have upgraded the microphone system since your husband. We just did that since your husband was up here. We've upgraded the microphone system, so it's actually better. It's actually better than it was.
Can everybody hear everything?
Yes. Well, I know it's difficult to believe.
It's just me and you.
Back here. Sorry.
I know it's difficult to believe, but we did upgrade the microphone system. We also purposely positioned the items in the budget in the way that we did because all of them have a budget impact that are prior to the budget. So those discussion items like trash and sewer and all that stuff, those are all budgets within our overall budget. So that's why they're positioned the way we didn't want to delay anybody unnecessarily, obviously, but we had to do that in that order. So I hope you understand. But the property tax, obviously Memphis has the highest property tax. Germantown has the second highest. If we raise taxes, we would be the second lowest at $1.40, but our effective rate would be in between Cairo and Germantown, which would make us third highest in Shelby County. Not highest in Shelby County, not highest in the state, not second highest in the state. Wouldn't be anywhere close to that. Talking $3 and something cents in Memphis would be $1.40 here. Effective rate of probably $1.80 roughly, something like that. Germantown's $1.86, I believe. So those are the actual.
But is that not included the fire rate?
Yeah, that's what I want to.
That's the actual, what we call our effective tax rate is us adding the fire fee basically to our rate. Now, if it's 65 cents, that would change things, or 67 cents. We're going to have actual figures on that in July. They got to get the figures together on that. But we will, relook at that, revisit that. But our actual rate would be $1.40, and how that relates to everybody else's actual rate. See, we don't have a wheel tax like some of the cities do. We don't have impact fees like some of the cities do. So if you want to compare apples to apples, we have to kind of look overall at what the expenses are in those cities to move to those cities and to pay their taxes and to pay their fees compared to what ours are. So our effective tax rate compared to someone else's simple tax isn't really a fair comparison. It's kind of comparing apples to oranges. We allowed that to happen early on in the discussion, but it was kind of wrong-minded because they have fees that we didn't apply to their tax rate as well. I have Paul Vandiver. Name and address for the record, please.
Paul Vandiver, 5219 Prairie Sky Drive. I think to answer on the debt limits, maybe y'all can answer this question for me, but if you have a debt limit, it's not really worth the paper it's written on because the commissioners can always vote the debt limit away if they want to. Not sure if that's accurate, maybe someone can answer that. I think a lot of people have been duped, lied to by the leaders of the no group. When I went on vacation, I came back and I saw hundreds of red signs that said no taxes. And what I'm hearing today is that 55% property tax is still a reality and it's still going to be here. And I think that many of you had all said that was going to be the case before the bond was even voted on. Yet we had a group of people who tried to lie and tell people it was about taxes. And so now that we know the reality and the truth is clear that the 55% property tax is still going to be here, my suggestion is that since now we're only getting the middle school with this 55% property tax, when before we could have had a middle school and a high school would have been the engine to grow the city on a great level. My suggestion is, if this is possible, to put the bond issue back on the ballot in September, because now that people realize they were lied to about the taxes, I think that we'll have 1,000 more people vote
for a better plan, because what the red line should have said was, it should have said more debt, because now if we have, with the no group, what they want is more debt, because in the future, we're gonna have the high school, and overall, we're gonna be spending more money to do it. So, so my suggestion also is, and not to put this on a school board chair, but I would suggest the leaders of the no group come together and fund a community apology party to the citizens, and I'll supply drinks. So.
Okay. A couple of things, just for the benefit of those joining us. I'm sorry, Commissioner Pluck, did you
I'll
want
also
to
get you to it next step as far as not being able to put this on the ballot for this September.
Okay.
I think the original.
Yeah. Okay. Let me go to debt limits, and I'll get with you on that.
Okay.
I've got a trade off. The debt limits that it's kind of, I talked about it last meeting and called it the paper tiger. Everybody's pushing these debt limits and debt limits. Well, federal debt limits, they're increasing federal debt limits every year. Debt limits are set by ordinance, and they can be changed by ordinance by this body. This body has always had and will always have, regardless of who's sitting in the seat, will always have the authority to adjust the tax rate. Will always have the authority to issue debt against the city, and those ordinances that set debt limits are as easily adjusted as they are created, and so it is what it is. It's not the solution. I know it's being painted as the solution, but it's not the solution. Look, Kyrble is talking about 85. Is it 85 million? 90 million dollars? A $90 million high school? I'm sure their debt limit is way below $90 million. Germantown is talking about a $38 million set of improvements to their school system. I'm sure their debt limit is way below $38 million. So how do you think they're going to issue that debt? They're going to increase those limits, or they're going to eliminate them altogether. And so that's kind of the paper tiger.
Germantown they have a percentage, so I would speak to that because actually I have the debt policies, but they did change them because it used to be to a specific, it was a percentage to a specific fund, and now it's to governmental funds. So, I mean, they did change it.
Yeah. So it can be changed, adjusted to meet whatever current goals the board has. It's really not that effective. Figurative maybe, but not effective. The bond versus tax, the vote was on the bond issuance, not the tax rate. And so that, I hope that explains that issue. The Board of Commissioners can't delegate the taxing authority to the public. They can delegate to the public. We could force the bond issue to a referendum or something like that, but we can't send to a referendum a tax rate vote. So we alone have the authority to adjust the tax rate. The voters have a protest period for 2 of the 3 options funding the school and their bond issuances. I think that, what was that? I'm sorry, Commissioner, I'm trying to.
I think we just addressed it. Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. Jeff Thomas. Okay. Name and address for the record, Jeff.
Jeff Thomas, 5267 Comfort View Lane. I do understand that y'all have a difficult job as well. I have 2 kids, 2 sons. My youngest is actually friends with Jay's son. Jay took his out on MUS. Both of mine went through elementary, middle school, and high school. Both are in college. The oldest just graduated Middle Tennessee State, commissioned into the Army as a second lieutenant. The youngest one plays college football in Tennessee. So I understand education. I have an engineering degree. I understand how important education is. But if you look at this, you're adding 55 cents on to an 85 cent current. That's a 65% increase into our current tax rate. 55% of 85 to 65%. That's a considerable amount. When I voted no because I wanted to make sure we had looked at everything we could look at. When I looked at the numbers up here for $20 million, it was a 2-year plan. My understanding is we got 5 still at Arlington. And if you go from 2016 to 2018, that's 2 years, so that would make you have to charge more for taxes, be able to get it in 2 years. I understand that. I just want to make sure, which is what we've asked y'all to do, that y'all consider this when you do make your decision. And if you do put it back up, I will vote no again. However, I know y'all have the capability of adding taxes. I have come to every meeting I'm aware of. The only way I've been able to find out the meetings are going on is to go online. But I can't sit at my computer with the hours I work and see that. I would like to know what the procedure is to notify the public. If I don't seek it out, I don't know it.
Okay, well, and we'll get the answer to that. Jim, can you tell them about how we publicize our regular meetings, work sessions, regular meetings?
Yeah, typically the website is the best way to get.
That's the only way I can find.
We also publish notice in the front of the building, pretty typical. Special meetings are advertised a little bit differently, sometimes newspaper it goes out to. Most on the website is the best way to do it.
I found out about the night until I got it.
Okay. Now, our town hall meetings that we had back in the fall to discuss the bond issue. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I neglected the local media also.
Local
Like
media.
for instance, the View publishes media.
This is only my good time, it's because I looked it up.
Right. The and I certainly understand. I certainly understand the concern. We also publish a calendar of our meetings every year that you can. We adopt a calendar of meetings that you have access to. For the town hall meetings that we had last fall, I actually personally contacted the neighborhood association presidents or their management companies and asked them to disseminate information on the meetings, time, date, location, so forth, and they agreed to do that, and so word got out to those neighborhood associations. I'm sorry if you didn't receive it. I don't know where you live, if you live in a neighborhood association.
Right down here on Evergreen.
Okay, gotcha. We're neighbors then. Gotcha. We don't have a neighborhood.
But I
association.
understand you have a difficult job.
It was difficult to get in touch
time
with
and your service and stuff.
Hey, we appreciate you coming. We're just trying to get answers.
And it's the first Thursday and the second Thursday of every month, unless there's a notice online. So
I showed up one time and the door was locked.
Yeah, and now, like, there are some exceptions. The reason you probably need to look at our calendar, like 4th of July, we wouldn't meet the first week of July, obviously. And then, your meetings around your major holidays, Labor Day or whatever, you're going to find that they're probably going to be altered somewhat. But that calendar is available, and maybe we can get a calendar for you before you leave here and make that.
Oh, I have one now.
Okay, you got one now? Good. Good enough, thanks. Appreciate you bringing that. That is important. It's hard to, we want everybody to get plugged in and come up here and speak their mind. Randy Gallup.
Well, I got one still in front of me.
Name and address for the record, please.
I just downloaded it today.
Randy Gallick, 10228 Ivy Oak Lane, and so everybody can hear, yes, I am married to the vice mayor. I stand in front of you, I've lived in several different metropolitan areas. I've consistently moved to where good schools are and have, by chance, moved into small communities that were building. When we moved to Lakeland in 2007, we saw a good community, good school. Yes, there were no property taxes, but our anticipation was we'd have property taxes, we'd see growth in the city. Since 2007, we haven't seen growth in the retail end of the business world. We've seen loss in it until Sprouts recently came and Lakeland LA Fitness opened up. I want to encourage this board to pass the 55-cent tax, to commit to building the middle school, to commit to the future of the kids in this community. We don't have kids in school here, but the benefit that will bring to me and to my wife is to the betterment of the community, rising home values, more rooftops, which will drive more business to this area, and developers that want to bring things so that we spend our money in Lakeland. I see it as a growth engine. I want to encourage you to pass the tax, build a school.
Okay. Thank you. Susan Miller. Name, address for the record, please.
I don't really look for the mic, but I'm short, so I'm going to so everybody can hear me.
Susan Miller, 9885 Woodland Bend. I'm coming here tonight, and at first I did not want to speak. I held on to my comment card because I was just going to let things run its course. Last night I attended the school board meeting. I was very open-minded. I had the most wonderful talks in the parking lot, like I did with you and Mr. Wright, with Laura, and I commend her for her work and her research at the board meeting. Personally, I have no problem or issue with the school. I do have an issue with the 55-cent tax. I think it needs to be ratio proportion to the 55 was for a $50 million bond. 20 million bonds should make it 22-cent rate. So I would ask that you take a look at that. Now that you have proposed another funding mechanism for a 12-year plan, again, that just seems like a way that you're going to slide it, regardless of what the no voters had said. As far as a party for the no voters to apologize, well, you can forget that because you need to read the sign. It's for no new taxes. The gloom and doom that Mr. Plunk referred to on Facebook, that is owed an apology. We were not gloom and doom. We're looking out for the best financial situation for this city, one that I live in, one that you live in. I have a child at DAS, which I should remind, my child goes to DES so that you could have this school system. If my child didn't go to DES, Arlington would not have made the agreement. You would have been a Stuckey County school for the elementary. So the ladies in the back row that keep clapping and giggling when older constituents are up here talking, and don't shake your head like you don't know what I'm talking about. These ladies have been here for a long time, and I had to sit back there and listen to their giddy. Sterling Place, she's from Sterling Place. Yes, a lot of people are from Sterling Place.
Okay.
You owe Nan an apology, though. She is not the source of the rumor that you just said. So I would request that you apologize to Nan for inferring that she was starting the Facebook rumor about the highest tax rate in West Tennessee.
Okay, I should have said that she advanced the rumor. All right, thank you. I stand corrected, you advanced the rumor. There we go. Next speaker, Sharon Helms. Last speaker. Name and address for the record.
My name is Sharon Helms. I live at 9557 Sequoia Point Road here in Lakeland. First of all, I came to the meeting last night for the school board meeting, and I want to thank Ted Harrell and Kevin Floyd and all the members of the board for the work that they've done. I think they've done a great job. I want to thank each commissioner and the mayor for y'all's work. I think you've done a good job at doing what you do. But what I want to say is, I'm a no voter, and all I hear at all the meetings, I didn't just come to the one meeting last night, I've been to several meetings, but I spoke last night for the first time, which I mentioned last night. Everything is about the students. I have a high school student. She just is fixing to go in 10th grade at Arlington Middle. She went to Lakeland Elementary, she went to Arlington Middle. It was crowded at Arlington Middle when she went there for 3 years. You know Jessica, okay? It was crowded back then. All of the talk has been about the crowded school, the education of our children. My daughter right now, in her class of the 9th grade, just finishing up at Arlington High School, there's 505 or 500 and something. I'm not real good with numbers, even though I'm a nurse. I'm a better nurse with numbers than I am with math in general. But out of those 500 and something students, there was 127 students tied for first place. First place, 127 students. Now don't tell me that they're not getting a good education. Everybody says, yes, Arlington Middle Schools are great education. There's so many things that our city needs, and y'all are charged. The school is charged with a plan for the school system. That's what they're charged for. That's what we expect them to do. But what we as citizens expect you as commissioners and the mayor to do is to do something for everyone, not just the students. Out of a population of 12,000 people, how many of them are students and how many were registered voters? 8,700, I think, is correct. Something like that. What are you doing for the seniors, the post office, other things? All I'm saying is, before you pass the tax, before you go ahead with count of 20 million in 12 years, please think of all of the residents, not just the students.
Okay. That's all.
I do want to say, last year, when we had our budget hearing, it was not too pleasant because some of us pushed to have somebody at the senior center. And all of us didn't agree, but it got done. The seniors are important. And I know I was one of the people that said that they need somebody at the senior center and they need activities and we need to utilize it. So I just want you to know that there are people on the board that are trying to look at everybody in the community, not just the schools. So.
I moved my in-laws here for a reason. I just want to make sure that's what we
Sir, hang on one second. We allow everybody to speak, and we'll allow dialogue back and forth between the board and the audience after the meeting. We got to retain order, I'm sorry. I know you're not being disrupted and whatever, but let's just keep it orderly. All right, commissioners, I guess this is our opportunity at input. We've heard from the citizens. Does anyone wish to speak to address the budget tonight? I spoke in the last meeting. I don't really have much more to say. I like the plan that the school put together. I think it's worthy of consideration and potential funding. I like the idea that, and I'm just speaking to the school portion of this, I understand, but I like the idea of it being a middle school expandable to a high school, because in the long run, that's going to be less expensive for the city. I mean, it's going to be more cost efficient by far. You're looking at, if you built a middle school and then separately built a high school, a full high school, then you're looking at a capital outlay of probably $70+ million, and that's not considering what interest rates may do or construction costs may do over that time. Certainly they'll increase. So I think I'm very happy with that portion of the budget. I'm very happy to see the direction that y'all chose to go, not just build a middle school. I think that's wise. The other parts of the budget, we went over line by line, and I'm very happy with what you've done, Jim. With the salaries, salaries have gone down collectively this year, and your budget looks to be intact. And Jessica, great job. You've lived up to your reputation. We know that you're a very talented person to handle the treasury of the city, and so y'all did a great job. I plan on supporting the budget.
If I could, I'm going to throw that all out into one. In front of you have a summary sheet of some budget amendments. This is first reading. Just a couple of these have been discussed. You know about this one, let you know what we're planning to do. Personnel budget after the adjustment did go up slightly. However, that's because we brought in some in-house personnel and we were terminating some contracts. So that's why that is. We're getting far more efficiency, more productivity out of doing it this way than the old way. And that is going to save us money and be able to provide better services in those areas. A couple of them I want to bring up specifically. It suggested that we add a position for a grant writer. I think that position can pay for itself 10 times over. We do some grant writing now. We have some volunteer grant writers that have done some work for us, but I think bringing it in-house to research, write, and administrative grants would be helpful. That's one position. We've already talked about bringing our janitorial services in-house for cost savings. That'd be a big one. Parks director, let's talk about parks director for a minute. This has sort of been the long, drawn-out saga on finding a suitable parks director. We talked about from last year's budget, $48,000 would get us a certain type of person for that parks director position, but not really what we need to grow the program, to fully grow the program and build it up where it could be as a model for the region. We have that person. I found that person. I've interviewed that person, but I need to bump it up from 48. In the budget, I have 56. And I believe the revenue that he will generate above and beyond what we currently do with the program and expand our programming is well worth that increase. At the same time, we've reduced the budget for the planning director. down amount we had budgeted, that came off that quite a bit, and other cost savings throughout that mentioned. So I believe this is solid. I just want to let you know these are the changes that we plan to make before final reading.
I believe you submitted those to individual commissioners. I'll be correct, yeah. Good deal. Commissioners, y'all have any questions, concerns, anything?
I agree with you. I think that we have a very good staff that works very hard. There's a couple of people that wear several different hats, and I appreciate that. I think the school board has done a tremendous amount of work to try and put the plan together. I know that people say this is too fast, and perhaps it is for some people, but they've been working on this for a year and a half. I mean, a lot of this came up when we had to renegotiate the contracts, which had to be done because the school board had to sign off on what was on them. And there were some red flags that were sent up. And from that, that's where a lot of this stuff came from. But to me, you have to be responsible and you have to look at what-if situations. And to not look down the road and at least acknowledge things that could happen and plan for them is not being responsible. I'm a proponent of the school. I've lived in several communities, and my husband just said that, and I was a single parent for 11 years. I moved twice to different cities that were similar to this with new schools, and I saw it. I experienced it. Rooftops came. They were great schools. So I know that if you have a good school in place, then a lot of other things fall in place. I also, Michelle Dial, I mean, everything she said, I grew up to give back to your community. I don't have children that are going to take advantage of the school. My husband and I left my job, so I don't have my nice income I used to have. But I'm willing to pay this money because it's the right thing to do for our community. And as a parent, I don't know that I would move here. If I knew everything and I was that single parent with that child, would I move here if I had a choice? Or would I go somewhere where I had a more secure future and I knew where my child was going to go to school all those years? That saddens me. So that's one of the reasons that I am a proponent of the school, because I want to see this area grow in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your input, Commissioner Ford.
I had intended to wait until, I believe the process, we're going to have a public hearing and then we'll have the final reading. Lakeland has been here 3 decades plus, and if you went back 30 years, there's not a whole lot of difference in what you would see short of an outlet mall than what you see today. And for the school board, when we elected not to be part of Shelby County school systems, we determined that we wanted to be the master of our own fate when it came to educating our children. We embodied a school board and a school superintendent that we gave the responsibility to direct and affect an educational program and a system to meet the needs of not part of the citizens, but all of the citizens. And by all the citizens, I'm talking about not if you have an elementary student or a high school student, or you have no children, because your values of your house and the cost of your everyday living is directly proportional to how well your city does. You can't buy a pair of shoes in Lakeland. You can't buy anything short of fast food or donuts. And now we have Sprouts. If all we want to do is stay status quo
and be nothing more than a named exit on Interstate 40, we need to pack it up and not follow an educational system, because people aren't going to come here. And if you say, I moved here because they didn't have property taxes, I really take issue with that. If that's the case, if that was the big draw for coming to Lakeland, was no property taxes, why do we have the most uninhabited area of all of the municipalities out here? Why is Germantown growing and Collierville growing and Arlington growing? And here we are, no property tax for 30 years, and we have no one here. So we've got to determine whether we want to be a city, a municipality, and act like one, and give the authority to couple with the responsibility that we've embodied in the school board. Give them the authority to do what's needed. I'm really disappointed that if we should have built one school at one time, got it done, and done it cheaper than we will ever do building two schools, ever. And the only thing that the opposition to the referendum, and I said it numerous times, this was not about property tax. Two issues. The property tax had been determined. The referendum was about issuing a bond, the instrument with which we were going to borrow the money. And to say it's any different is an untrue. And for people to think that when they went in and voted no, if they didn't read the little blurb right there, it never once said about tax. It was about bond issuance. I support the 55-cent tax. I did then, I do now, and I will whenever all the Sterling Place people, which I'm one of, has an average of $24.80 a month to pay. I'll pay it. I'll pay it if it's double, because I think we need the school. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, any other comments? Anybody want to make any other comments? All right. We'll have further discussion on the budget, tax rate, and the school at our next meeting. Madam Recorder, obviously that one does not go on the consent agenda. We'll go to item number 13.
Final reading and ordinance of the City of Lakeland, Tennessee to commit specific revenue sources and establish specific uses of those resources.
Okay, this is the one committing the 55 cents if it passes to the schools and only to the schools. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, Madam Recorder, next item, please.
First reading is to amend the official zoning map of the City of Lakeland by rezoning the property located at 10360 Highway 70 from agricultural to neighborhood business.
Okay.
Now for something completely different. This is a rezoning forwarded from the Municipal Planning Commission at their last meeting. And what is Randy still here? Oh, great, there you are. Thanks for hanging around. Randy Garber is the applicant, owner of the property. Well, this is a property up on Highway 70. This is commonly known as the Bartlett Gutter property. It's a business that Randy owns. It's located just past Evergreen Road, which is here. This is Highway 70. You got the corner piece, which is part of Evergreen Square. You have the developed piece. There are existing businesses here. You've seen a milestone survey being one of them, Bartlett Gutter the other, and additional ones. Right here is vacant, and it goes down there. This is all zoned commercial here and here already. As you can see, the subject property is zoned agricultural. Now, this goes back a long time. This has been an existing business for some time. What this would do would allow Mr. Garber to have conforming uses. Currently, he has non-conforming uses on the property. Now, going back to the big question that everybody asks is, under this classification, agricultural, what happens if, say, my property, my buildings are destroyed, can I rebuild them? The answer currently is no, just because the uses don't match. Now, I don't think anybody here has any trouble with the uses that are there, the general neighborhood, commercial type uses. It makes sense. Now, if this were to be zoned C1, as is proposed, again, the question, could it be rebuilt if it were destroyed? The answer would be yes, you could bring those uses back, however, you would have to comply with all the current design standards under the city zoning ordinances. So that would be the big difference. So if we don't have problem with the uses there, it's a dated building, it's been there for a long time. It does not comply with our current ordinance. So again, if upgrades were made, it would have to comply with our current zoning code. So the issue tonight, again, is scenario 11, is to rezone on first reading, which will be next week, an ordinance to rezone the property from agricultural to C1. I'll take any questions you have.
Okay, Mr. Manager, I have cards from Susan and Randy Yarber that would like to speak. Okay, Susan, you don't want to speak? All right. My wife speaks for me, so that's, yeah.
She signed the card.
That's right, okay. All right, Randy, that's good. So come on up here. You want to speak to us?
I thank Jim for working with me here, and Jean Dunn, she's still here. There. I've been in business there 20 years, and some of you probably didn't live here then, none of you were on the board. I've been before in this building several times years ago, and if anyone can remember this pie-shaped property next to the right of my property, I own that also. That was a junkyard. It was the biggest eyesore in Shelby County. I don't know if anybody remembers that. But I improved that by cleaning it up. I've been paying taxes on it since, I don't know, 98, whatever. I think I maintained that property. It's probably one of the nicer properties between Bartlett and Arlington. And I would like to see and appreciate the consideration to zone in C1. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions, comments, anything like that? Saying none? All right, this will be on the regular agenda. Consideration. Next item. Thank you all for coming. And, all right.
Resolution of the City of Lakeland, Tennessee, authorizing non-interest bearing Lakeland School System Fund revenue / tax anticipation interfund loan notes not to exceed $300,000.
Okay. We have a presentation on this. Brief presentation on this.
Not so much a presentation. This happened last year. If you guys remember, he passed a resolution to authorize a $2 million bridge loan from basically taking money from the general fund reserves and allowing the school system to draw on that as needed. They drew $1 million and they have to pay that back by June 30th, which Ted will write a check tomorrow, right?
Good.
So they're going to pay that back by June 30th, and Ted has requested this year a much smaller amount, but just to get by if they're in the summer not going to be. Is that right? I don't want to speak for you, but.
Yeah, no, I believe you said in your school board meeting when you started building reserves and stuff. Come on up here. Yes, sir.
We appreciate, this time last year, we did know that there was a lag between the start of school when we needed to start paying full payroll, and we would start getting the money from the county trustee and from the state of Tennessee. So there's almost 2-month lag there. So we requested what wound up being more money than we needed, which was $2 million. We drew down $1 million and had it in the bank as our pad. I do want to report to the Board of Commissioners, we're expecting to have a surplus this year of between $500,000 and $700,000 that we'll be able to put in our reserve. So I'm very pleased with that. I think we've run a very fiscally conservative school system for this first year. However, I do still need a little bit of a pad to make those first couple payrolls, and then the following year, I would anticipate, if all things go as well, not needing to borrow any money. But I'm requesting $300,000 for this year. We will pay back the $1 million this month. That's not going to be an issue. And then if we could have the loan for $300,000, that would get us through. So I appreciate you working with us on that.
Thank you for the explanation. Anyone want to make any comment? Saying none. Next item, please. That's going to be regular. Well, hold on. No, we can do that one on consent. Okay with consent? No objection? So ordered. Next item.
Resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a cooperation agreement with Shelby County regarding the urban county designation.
quick explanation?
Sure, this is basically a housekeeping item. We've been participating with this group through the county housing department for years. We've never officially been a member, we've never had a contract signed with them. However, we have been getting funding from them through CDBG bank grants and disaster grant funds. Built our senior center through this group. We've done other stormwater improvements through this group. What they're doing now with all the municipalities is redoing their contracts, make a slight change. We thought this time we could actually embrace it officially. Really has no impact. It won't be any change to how we operate with this board. So I think it's a good item, I think, to move forward with it.
Okay. And any questions, comments?
I read it, and I endorse it. I think we need to do this. It's been helping us for a long time, we might as well become.
Yeah. And another point too, the $1 billion grant federal revenue we're talking about, that flows through this organization. So, you know, they have value, they prove their value.
I got you. And that's, yeah, we're hoping to participate. That's competitive application.
That's correct.
Participate in that. Good, great. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, that can go on the consent agenda, I assume, without objection. Sword, Madam Report.
Resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Lakeland to return the LPRF grant and begin the grant replacement process.
Okay.
Thank you. We've previously discussed this one. As we know, we had the grant from the state that's been volleyed back and forth between different sites. It's currently set for the Memphis Arlington site. However, it's up on the end deadline that we have to have it completed by. Unfortunately, we're not going to have that done. The process to extend, it's not just a simple extension. We have to actually formally get the money back and then enter a replacement process, which basically is extend the money. So we will enter that process and move forward.
I got a couple of questions. First of all, you say extends the money. When he presented to the board, I actually spoke with him probably, I understood that if we didn't have it, we had to return this and there would be an opportunity at another period down the road, which is coming up here, to apply for the equivalent, another $250,000. So essentially, the way I understand it is we're actually losing that $250 and we'll apply for we'll have a new opportunity to apply for a new $250 now.
Now, it's actually two separate items. When we go into the replacement grant process, we're not competing with others.
Okay.
When the next round comes up, we can compete again with a new application.
So we could actually have them going side by side.
Exactly.
Okay, so I understood that wrong.
Because this is in the previous grant cycle from 2 years ago. So we'd be coming up on the new grant cycle.
This money was allocated for the park that we've been talking about.
Oh, yeah.
It's earmarked.
Yeah, I know.
But the designation, we changed the designation site, and now we've got to go back and reapply. What they'll do is they'll pull it out, but the money will still be earmarked for our usage, and we'll just go back and they'll, it's paperwork.
You're saying changed it from the original site on the Jones property
There,
over to
there, back over here.
Yeah, actually, here, and one thing I will say about that process is that the board, and this just, because I agree with the fact that we needed to delay, because the potential of marrying this with the high school site would have been a good move. And so I would have supported delaying to see how the bond referendum went. But that needs to come back before the board in the future instead of just unilaterally doing that, because the board did take official action. And so the only way that can be delayed or the plan can change is bring it back before this board. So in the future, let's bring it back before this board, have the formal process of saying, hey, we have new information pending that we didn't see before, we had the potential of putting this here, and we want to delay until after the referendum to see if this comes to fruition.
Yeah, I agree.
And that'd be the proper way to do it.
Yeah, and technically the location never changed from Memphis Arlington back to the Jones property. We are doing some research and some flirting, I guess, with that.
Yeah,
but yeah, it never left Memphis
They
Arlington.
basically let us delay.
right. And I would have supported the delay just simply because it's a better plan to have it over there. Honestly, it is. It may be something if we get this 94 acres looking at doing.
I think we run out of time on it. I think that's the problem. The time element on awarding the grant and starting the construction will be the determining factor. And we may have to turn it back in.
Yeah, I know we'll go a lot further with the dollar over there because the construction costs can be less on that.
The problem is that we have to turn it back in and we take ourselves out of the cycle, correct? So we wind up by giving back $250,000, it cost us $500,000.
No, I got you. I'm with you. I just want to look at all options, and, you know, that's fine. No more questions from me. Anybody got any questions? Let's go on the consent agenda. No objection. Seeing none, so ordered. Consent agenda. Next item.
Resolution, appointment to Shelby County Municipal Solid Waste Planning Board.
Okay. This is a pretty routine matter. You can go to the consent agenda without objection. So ordered. Next item.
Resolution authorizing a contract with CTR Coatings for sanitary sewer manhole rehabilitation in the city of Lakeland.
Okay. Brief explanation,
This
please.
is the standard contract, it's fixed in the budgeted amount, so recommend to move forward.
Okay. All right. Any questions, concerns? Seeing none, can go on the consent agenda without objection. So ordered. Next item, please.
Resolution authorizing a contract with Samsung Equipment Company Incorporated for push camera for sewer inspection for the city of Lakeland.
Okay. All right. We've been talking about sewer cameras a lot since I've been on this board. I don't know what- They're important, I guess. But all right. So any questions, comments? Let's go on the consent agenda without objection. So ordered. Madam Recorder, is that all the items come before this board? Okay, seeing no further items come before this board, we've already had our public discussion. I don't have any other cards to have public discussion. We have any announcements? Any announcements? Seeing none, we have a motion to adjourn. Well, we don't really need a motion to adjourn. I'll adjourn without objection. How's that?
I'll
No.
you like this, I'll reach out to everybody, I'll probably.
Yeah.
I'll somebody tomorrow.
You just go call everybody individually. All right? We are adjourned. Thank you.